哦，Sangye 觉得
那这个叫那章丘不
就把这
能
他呢
当
要
个是前那个前所一别所能说了别
这
三
他
千
也
多把来说，
Sangye 觉
这
得罗
种他给叫那章丘
就把这他呢
不。
要算
so je dage jinso gibe sanang tola
罗
so
Sangye 觉得罗也就那
chanang la chancho
就
bardo
把他
ne
就
so
大
dage
也
jinso gibe sanang ge tola bhenjre sange do bara so
身见堂姐
dan
的话，
devi gyutan
那
tempa
这么这些都我当
Dunga gyudan tawara gyurje dunga
我
me
的我
Deva damba dame tawara
这
gyurje
些人晓
Gyurje
得见
tadam dame tanyam chimbo la nebra
我
gyurje
他见的我当的
Dam devi gyudan dembra gyurje dunga
中
dam
我当中我的给给
gyudan
当我来给
Tawara girje
中
dunga
我
me
的
dewa damba dame tawara girje nyere chatan dave tangyam chimbo
那
nebra
会有人
gyurje
他们见的我当的给当
ye gyudan dembra girje
中
dunga
我当中我的给给
ye
当的
gyudan tawara girje dunga me be dewa damba dame tawara girje nyere
人晓得见到
Tanum
那是
Chimbotan
我
Deva Gyurje
常找我当学见小法。
Puji Sambhadan
自在
Jesa
也难过心说话也
Pavayi Gyewa Chunse Dage Jesa Bhatam
看
Je
见了也想就去
Ancho Chimpurong Om
大学不就永远
Ye Sui Medo Dang Rira
让
Li
有些你的眼光的上也
Ge
行，
Sindo Mide Purvayi
如
Dogwe
果那
Nam
在听了就不了，
Bhagavasho
对，
Janamge
当我所以
Jada Jada Chejong Tumon Tewaye Chige
我
Koko
我说。
Balden Doji Chang Rigun Chabda Lama Karma Pa Kinkuru Kungi June Sisi Paguri Dam Nanjurma Trinley Kungi Jebo Wangyo Chugyong Bejen Chamdra La Nanjur Seji Gube Dida Chalme Tuji Kyong Raz Balden Sawe Lama Rinpoche Dagi Churu Pede Dejo La Kadin Chimbe Gune Jesonde Kusun Tugi Ngudru Tando So 다소 섬전 탐 제게 로치소 로라 징게 납도서 체 람도 로라 징게 납도서 람초바 서라 징게 납도 출바에 시소 차와라 징게 납도서 라소다 마그르담 기타다 님데 섬전 탐제 코르와 능력이 가서데 잘데 남게 라나메베 코폰라 고버 차티 시도 담베 철라 최선 곰숨기 거네 주버교 냠베 꿀릉 청추초도 특게바 살답네 담베쇼 셈브르쇼
Please listen the Dharma with bodhicitta, thinking that I am going to establish all mother sentient beings into the state of omniscient Buddhahood, liberating from all kind of samsaric suffering. Therefore, I am going to engage in Dharma practice through listening, contemplation, and meditation.
알아 다 데라 간 셈브르제 쉬기림바 파베덴바 시제
So the teaching we're discussing about is the Four Noble Truths.
알아 다 파베덴바 시레 되는 거도 파베덴바 시기다 신이당 넘버 10에 가브레 텔레 데네 둥을 덴바기 신이다 넘버 가상 셰사와체 군중 덴바야 팔질 셰사레 데네 찍디 최소 가강 데네 랍게 세데 넘버 찍디 셰차 최소 제성 어디 드링 테스 시기
So we have completed talking about the first noble truth, which is the noble truth of suffering, about its characteristics and aspect and the function, everything. And also we have almost completed talking about the second noble truth, which is the noble truth of origin of suffering. But somehow we forgot to talk one of them, which is translated as a strong producer. There are so many different translations. So if you know the Tibetan word is Rabke. So one of translation says strong producer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it.
올라서 드링 가서 가상 군중 덴발라 넘버 시열에 어디 디디 넘버 시디 지당 가서다 군중 덴발라 록슈 로버슈바 양 넘버 시열어 가상 록슈 된 시에 제송도 록슈 되더니 군중 덴발라 가서 수수교 탐을 받아서 이 로버슈고래 록슈 들라다 지당 싸의 록슈 니열에 손에 니 되가라나 동알라 독된라 규 메버 짐바당 미tumba gyuru zimbas ni nala du gore lokshudi.
So we also didn't talk about the wrong perception through the truth of origin yesterday. So I'm going to say two things about that. And then it says there are mainly two kinds of wrong perception, which is gyur mebar zimba dantini kind of chikti khansong
미tumba gyuru zimba.
Also, then one is we thought or we perceive there is no cause of suffering, and then sometimes also we think something wrong as a cause, which is not the real cause, but we think that is the cause of suffering. So this is the most important two things. That's all.
Then gyur mebar zimba de kare lana nganso kyangpemba 무디 경편바 돼서 따라 겨왕시 매버 좀 봐요라. 겨왕 비디 애니 레긴데 양 지금 알아.
라소.
디인데 뒤서 그래. 애니 뭐도 니랭기 풍복이 되니 규 매버 좀 봐서는 뒤서래.
라소. And then when we say we don't believe in the cause of suffering is the one I think it's called Jangpenpa in Tibetan. I think in Sanskrit it's called Charvaka or Charvaka, something. I will give you the correct the term of Sanskrit. For the time being, let's just use the Tibetan word. It's Jangpenpa. So for Jangpenpa, in their view, they says there is no cause of suffering and no something called like karma or the affliction that produces our suffering. So this is what from our point of view, this is wrong view.
Hola, tiene que me parece mitumba gyuru zimbasana yang gyumaim bani gyuru tawayara pedo chashana chiding jibabu kelingera.
Also, yes.
Jibabu kelingin deso gidin ngato dungal gi gyudi jibabu imbashagora.
Also, so yeah, the Sanskrit word is charvaka. Charvaka. If you like a Sanskrit word for Jangpenpa, is charvaka, and then it's in English it just says nihilist system, so that they assert that there is no cause of our suffering. And then when we say we perceive something wrong as a suffering is those who assert that the cause of our world, who assert there is a creator and that created all our world. And this, from the Buddhist point of view, this is also wrong.
Oh, last thing that kunjungla logwashwadi da chidang shi share hine shi di any somebody di mitimbe gyuru simbana la dugore o di da dordena di ni na la dugore da gyu mebar simbana mitimbe gyuru simbani na la dugore.
So usually, generally speaking, there are four different kind of wrong perception regarding with this truth, but we can include them into two, which are perceiving there is no cause, and then we're taking something wrong, false cause, which is not really cause. So other two is included in this, the second one. So in short, we can include all of them in these two categories of holding something wrong as a cause and believing there is no cause.
All things that lokshu kunjung la logbar shube lokshu digi nyembola any kunjung dembe number shi sware 다 넘버 시디 가상 시바나 시드니 규 군중 랍게 겐 디 넘버 시라.
So the reason why four aspects of the truth of origin was taught is as an antidote of these four perceptions. And then, as I said yesterday, they are cause, origin, strong, producer, and condition.
Olas, 디 다드니 다 군중디 가상 시바나 시드니 레던 녀몽바 니여레 아니 녀몽베 나네 녀몽바 망고여레 디 나네 쪼디 아니 세바레 샤기도.
So when we say origin of suffering, as I said yesterday, there are two main things, which are klesha and karma. And then out of many various kind of kleshas, and then the most important and more the root is what we call attachment or craving. According to Tibetan word, it's good to say craving. In Tibetan we say sepa, which means craving. craving, craving.
Olas, 디 다드니 레던 세바디 드니 규레 더 군중이 넘버 시에라 시나는 당보디 규라 드니 레던 세바디 치지 규이 넘버인데 랑데 둥을기 싸와임베 셔 둥딩기 싸와디 그랬잖아 레던 뇽모 레당 뇽몽바 세바드레 김진지 지난 레던 뇽모베 세바디 레던 뇽몽바 세바디 애니 규이 넘버레스.
So we says the karma and the kleshas are the cause because they produce their own result is suffering. So they are cause of the suffering. That's why they could be categorized as cause.
Ola, tinda ledang nyomongba sebadi tini kunjungi nabayang re karjane lamna tini rangde tungal namrang mangbo tiyang tini lenchik damay ba lendang mangbo namrang mangbo lendang mangbo kebar jaba inzan kunjung song re yes kunjungi nabares.
And they are also the origin. Here, again, I have to use the different translation for it. In Tibetan, we say kunjung means the source of everything, source of all. Kun means all, and then jung means from where it comes. So the karma and the afflicted emotion, craving, are also the source of all because they produces suffering not only once, but again and again. Also not only one type of suffering, but they produce many different, so all sorts of suffering and again. That's why they'll also be categorized as the source of all suffering. That's why it's called the source of all, kunjung.
Ola. Ti lagu gasuda karla gor lana din ngasu dungal di khowa di din khowa la thongme thaya mare jisi marik ba mabang ba do thame thaya mara di dawe din thongma dan nyomu marik ba mabang ba do thame be din dungal namrang mangbo di yang thongma na thame ba ani di dawe mangbo di thangma karla din ke go res lamna din le dang nyomu ba sebala din ke go res. And
then, yes, as I said earlier, another reason we can explain in this way also. As we said, there's no beginning of samsara, and unless you completely purified ignorance, there is also no end of samsara. And then during the samsara, we go through all different kinds of suffering, and all this suffering are produced by the karma and the afflicted emotion, the craving. Therefore, they could be called the source of all.
Olas. Tinda dar rabke sedi younger dini tungal dang ogdungal segonza le dang nyumong ba sebadi any rabke number kimsen garre lamna dini rangi tebu tungal shukdabo keber chegen res. Ti labdi da shukdabo sena nga dungal la chechung mangbo yara. Tini ngensong song dungal di montul haya mi tenla dungal yore de hine ngensong song dungal di 하장 숙침으로 디 나는 냐외 동안데 하장 숙침으로 냐외 나는 안데는 날메기 동안데 하장 숙침으로 어 데려베드네 동안 숙 잡고디 상마양 거릴 되는 계고알라나 레당 녀몽바 세발라 되는 계고래 디디 레당 녀몽바 세바디 아니 랍게 넘버레스.
And then third is we call Rabke. As I said, there are many different translations, and one of it says strong producer. I think that sounds good. Or some also says like violent development or growth of suffering. But anyway, the suffering we're going through in samsara is also very strong. Of course, generally speaking, all samsara beings are going through different kinds of suffering, but the suffering of the lower realm in general is more stronger than what the people are going through in the human and God's realm, and even within the hell realm, the Connie, you can come here. How to pronounce the one incense hell? Anyway, the I don't Sanskrit word is called apichal. You know this word?
Incessant.
Yeah, this is how it is translated. Incessant hell. So anyway, the most dangerous hells. Let's say that. Okay, in Sanskrit is very very easy. Apichi, say apichi hell. So the out of all whole samsara, the suffering that is being experienced by the being in this hell is the most stronger one, and this suffering is also produced by the karma and the klesha, or again the craving. Therefore, they are also called strong producer.
All us. Oh, the Kunjun Dimba number Tambu Sumdi Dira. The number Shipadi Garathana Kin Laura. The D Garla Garathana number Tambu Sumdi Dini Penangaranso Nyumon Balatene Le Sagra. Pena Marikbadang Sebanila Dene Le Sagra. Marikbada Sebanila Dene Le Sabadi Dene Nanso Namshiki to the Basha Shagra. Ingaranso Dene 7 Penada 7 Naso Bangze na Shashavadora. 7 Bangze na Shashadi, then 7 de la Tebuke Niba Yoredi in Andi Leisure Gain the Matebadu, then you get to Mara or pay didore. Things that Nanso Deni Ledang Nyomambala Dene Sashabe Leg Bakcha Naranso Denis Namshiki to the Shashavadi, Bangze na Shavanashi, 7 Bangze na Shavanashi. Teni Leisure King ya Nipadi ya Sever Jogora, or did a Leisure King of the Caterres and I engage Severes, or did the Shibadi di Shigora, King in Nabasadi.
So those are the first three aspects of the truth of origin, which are cause, origin, and strong producer. And the fourth one is called condition. And the reason is, again, as I said earlier, that a seed is planted on our consciousness through the power of ignorance and craving. But unless this seed meets the conducive condition, then only it can produce a result. So, for example, if we have a seed and we just keep that seed in a treasury or in a house, and then until it meets the necessary conditions such as moisture or water and so forth, it will never produce a sprout out of this seed, even though the seed has the energy or potential to produce a sprout. But unless it meets the necessary condition, it will never produce a sprout. In the same way, even though at the beginning, through the ignorance and craving, we have planted the seed of suffering in our consciousness, but in order to produce the real suffering, then again it needs condition, and then condition is nothing else but craving again. Therefore, the craving is also called the condition here. And the fourth aspect of the second noble truth, the truth of origin, is what we call the condition.
All us, the King in number Shadi goes Sebadi Shagda, or the Nyumon was Sebadi Chijin, King in the Ramde Dumalgi, Hinji Jigin Jibiashers, Kimsin Shagda.
So it says the craving is the condition for producing this suffering, because it will have to produce its result, which is nothing but suffering. That's why it is a condition.
All us. The indigenous Sebadi, Legi 7 the Sever Jigging, Legi 7 Niba Sever Jigging, any chili to shirky kindore in the legend against la.
So again, the craving is the one which mature the seed that was planted by the ignorance and craving. So, and it is like a moisture or the fertilizer that's why it's called the condition.
All steam the dilla da seba di kunjungi to shadi kasu marikbagi le sa la yang seba gugore marikba seba ni gi sa seba legi 70 niva seba jebala yang seba gugore din da ne seba di seba ham to shadi any kunjungi to shagi re di nenga di yago hago na tene ngaran so nyamningi to di yang tene shenlo da ngejung to yimba di nenga chimbo yimba thongure ngasa.
So as you can see from this teaching, out of many different kinds of kleshas or afflicting emotion, the craving or the attachment is the main one, because without the support of craving, the ignorance itself cannot plant the seed at the beginning, at the first place. And then without the support of the craving or attachment, even there is a seed, it cannot produce the result, which is suffering. Therefore, if we know that very clearly, then also we will understand how important for us to have a genuine sense of revolution or renunciation, and then also it will make us understand the important that it's important to take the revolution and renunciation as our main practice.
All din da digi din kunjung demba gi senyi da namba ko la she sa so din da gongding gi din senyi da namba shigre.
So I think I completed talking about the second truth, which is the truth of the origin. Now I'm going to talk about the third one, which we call the noble truth of cessation. Okay, let me say one more word here. When Drupon Khenpo says Lengji Chekin, I just say condition, but according to Tibetan, it says cooperating conditions, if it makes difference. Okay, so if I just say condition, that's only gen. When you say Lengji Chekin, that in English translation says cooperating condition.
All ta gongding gi senyi di gre re la na gongding sana lamden la tene pangje 7 pangbe dalwa di gongding se gre so.
And then, first of all, the definition or characteristic of the truth of cessation is the separation. It says the separation. Dhalva means separation. Separation from kleshas, relying on the path of, relying on the truth of path. And that separation is what we call the cessation.
Ta gongding de la de ngaso de sul mangbo yoro. Ta ngaran so danda di thekwa tumong gi luk jene shego ara. Thekwa tumong gi luk la de gongding se di ani pangja dungal demba dang kunjung demba pangbe kokbaji kakba pangja dungal demba kunjung demba 7 de jeba kakbe kakchaji yoro. Dila gongding shagira. Di gongding di chini shego mare. Thekwa tumong lo la. Ta ngaso thekwa chimbe luk la gar gongding se na dene takpa nideng ki chini yaro, nga rangsa sem ki chini di rangshin namdare, dene lam gomdi ko lubru ki dima yang pangne lubru ki dima da takpa nideng chagiro. Dene takpa nideng ki chini di la gongdeng lagira, da thikpa chewe lu la. Tanda thikpa tumang ki luk shedi koso dene gongdeng di chini shagimare, dene dungal pangbe pangbaham, dungal dan dalwe dene kokpa che yaro, dungal kakbe kokpa che yaro, kakchadi. Dene gongdeng shagire. dungal mebe mechade mada gongden di chini shag mare.
So there are different view how you express how explain the cessation. Now we're talking from the common point of view, which means common in all yanas. Then the cessation means only that part of the cessation which ceases the suffering, which means when you are free from the first two truths, the truth of suffering and the truth of the origin of suffering, together with its seed, then the separation, that self is we call the cessation, because you already have ceased all the suffering, and then there's no suffering. And this part, which is separation from the suffering, is what we call the cessation in common yana. But from the uncommon point of view of Mahayana, then we talk about the Dharmadhatu, the Dharmata, the reality of all phenomena. But in the common sense, we don't talk about the Dharmata, when we talk about the cessation, we just talk about that part, the separation from the suffering and the origin of suffering, which is we call the cessation. But from the Mahayana point of view, which is uncommon view of Mahayana, then when we say cessation, the truth of cessation, then we say we are talking about the Dharmata, which we says the one who possesses twofold purity, because the nature of mind is naturally pure from the beginningless, and when we realize that we achieve the cessation, means we also have purified the what we call the temporary obscuration, aloburgitima in Tibetan. So we have two purity there, purity from the beginning, and then purity of purifying the obscuration, temporary obscuration. So from the Mahayana point of view, that is what the cessation is. And from the common Yana point of view, then just the separation from the suffering and the causes of suffering is what the cessation is.
Hola. Di kebar de kogdin la da chuni de shagwa da mashak be kebar de kawane jungore la na. Tene ngazo nyente ki lugla, tene togje tawa de tongni shag marwa. Range tube sesu tube kansa ki da ki tongpa chong, kansa ki da meba samde togje tawa re ma do, kansa rangshin ki tube tongni shag marwa. Tene teba chimbe lugla tawa de kare tongni, che tamje rangshin ki tube tongpa kansa dan che tamje rangshin ki tube tongni de shagarwa. 어디에 자더니 따와양 동니라샤 동니 도벨람 냠네 제자 당신 남자기 춘이디 도지 따와라 당신 남자기 춘이 도벨람 검네더니 대부톱도 가서 로르기 디마 빵네 아니 춘이디 다번이 되는 게왜 다번이 되는 건데 제기라 어디다베더니 뭔데 제게 다번이 되기 춘이디 꼭된 샤고래 다 디가서 태버투문 가서 되니 도지 따와디 양 동니 샤고 말아 랑게트베 제기 제수트베 동베 아니 다메바 참 샤고라 맞아 딘두기 동바리 샤고 말아 딜 때네더니 공된 샤디 가서양 아니 녀몽바나 동을 달외 달차 땀라 사람마도 춘이 샤고 말아.
So the difference is not only at the cessation from the Hinayana, I mean the common the point of view, what the final realization they also think is what we call the selfless of person, which means which is emptied by the self, which we usually say the self, which is permanent, partless, and autonomous self. This is how it is translated in English. So, and that means they don't talk about the dharma, the shunyata of dharma. Therefore, their cessation is also just the separation from that kind of belief, which is empty by the self, which is permanent, partless, and autonomous self. But from the Mahayana point of view, that is not the final view, the final destination. We talk about the emptiness of both selves, self person and self phenomena. Therefore, we are talking about the ultimate reality, which is emptiness, and then therefore, when we achieve the cessation from the Mahayana point of view, then cessation is also talk about being possessed to twofold purity, which means the natural purity of our mind and the purity that comes from purifying the temporary obscuration. Therefore, when we talk about the cessation from Mahayana point of view, then we are actually talking about the ultimate reality of all phenomena. But when we talk about the cessation from the common Yana point of view, then we are just talking about just the separation from the suffering, not the dharmata, which is emptiness.
Hola, takkeje dordeshena tene togje tawala tharagi khabari jaba indang tawadi gombe ani lamla tene dibadan dawe debu gogdin dilayang tharagi khabari yare khabar jungare.
So in short, since there's difference between the view which is to be realized or achieved between the Mahayana and Hinayana, therefore the path which they practice to achieve that goal, there is also different. coarser level and coarse level and the subtle level, and therefore the result which came through practicing path is also different. There's a difference between the true cessation of Mahayana and Hinayana in the term of being subtle and the coarse.
Hola, tiene te voy a me lu jena, gogden tartu di gare la nga to. Sangye ku shi sha di ngoni gu sha da. Ngoni gu di dangwa ni ding ing tartu ba di ngoni gu sani sha ra. Tiene da ngoni gu di gogden tartu de re. Te voy a me lu la.
So in the Mahayana point of view, the ultimate cessation or the ultimate truth of cessation is what we call the Swaviveka Kaya. You know, when we talk about the four Kayas of Buddha, then there is something also called Swaviveka Kaya or Ngonyigu in Tibetan, and which is the ultimate nature of our mind, free from this true purity. Free from the obscuration, which possess the twofold purity, the natural purity and the purity from purifying the temporary obscuration. And that is what we call the Swavivekaya. And this is the ultimate truth of cessation from Mahayana point of view.
Hola, ta di ro gogden de la shagdan ni do. Ta gangde ro sha na yan de gangdar gogden di number sheet de ba yore so le da. De la number sheet yore.
So generally speaking, there's two different way of recognizing this truth of cessation. But anyway, again, this the truth of cessation has four different aspects. Swavivekaya is Sanskrit word, and in English it says essential dimension of awakening. That's what English translation is. But I don't know if it really have equivalent meaning or not. That's why I was using Sanskrit word, which is Swavivekaya. That's the Sanskrit word for Ngonyigu.
Hola, tiene gogden de la number sheet yo go de garsana. Ta gogden thana diga so tharbara. Gogden am tharba de la dine lokshuk lobra shuk nga so susikyo thamal basogi. Any lower should be looks here, yes. The D doctor am, dig nimbola, any coding number she's on it.
And then again, when we say the truth of cessation is nirvana, actually it's nirvana, a different name of nirvana. So again, why there is four different aspects of nirvana or the truth of cessation is because for us, for ordinary being, again, there's four different kind of wrong perception of that. That's why as an antidote of that wrong perception, then it was taught for different aspect of the truth of cessation.
Oh, the golden logo should be shady garland tambo. Tarba yemi the simba. Kashigi tarba tawane, yomare sangara. Then tarba yemi the simba.
So first perception is that there is also being who believe there is no liberation at all, and that is the first wrong view about the liberation.
Oh, the Luxu Nibadi Garsana, Sarjigi, Kever Gashila, Tarbar Zimbas.
And then the second wrong view is some people believe something that is contaminated is the liberation.
This is Garilla, so Dambo, Koran Mu Zindang, the Norsona, Tarba Mu Zindang, Nordogro.
So how so if you have a wrong view of samsara at the beginning, then also you will have the wrong view of liberation from samsara.
You got it, then it Dungal Dembadi, Dungal the Abuji Muzimatuna, then it Dungal letter Taba the Abu Muzin to Mares. In the Sangye Sunay, the Tambu Dungal Shepherdjas with Dira.
That's the reason why Buddha said, at the first time he says, the suffering should be understood, or you should understand suffering, is because if we cannot realize suffering as suffering, if we cannot recognize suffering as a suffering, then also we cannot recognize the liberation from suffering.
Hola, Stin the Dingazo Dungal Dingazo, Dungal Chibula, Dungal Resana. Dungal Mepapena Sukham, Dungal Yomara. Then Sukham Sukhamgi dine gopang topsona tharba thore samgira ngando.
So therefore, out of three suffering, if we think the suffering of suffering is the only suffering, then there is no suffering in the sukham samsara sukham
No,
la.
no.
Then there is no suffering. Then according to that, those people who believe the suffering of suffering is the only suffering, then for them, then there is no suffering in the form realm, in the rupa dhatu, because there is no suffering of suffering in that realm.
Di indi kaso dine di garasana kyaba dijigi dungal imba mashina dine sukhamda dungal me samgira dukham je tharba re samgira.
So if we don't recognize the all-pervasive suffering as suffering, then since there is no suffering of change or suffering in the form realm, therefore we thought this is a liberation. We are liberated from the suffering.
Daga nashi ngaso da girwe dungal di ore da kyaba dijigi dungal imba mashina dine ngaso samde ore samde shiba yenche la girwe dungal yo marwa kyaba dijigi dungal mado. Dine samde shiba yenche sukham samde shiba dang dine digala sungme shi disola dine tharba re samgira ngaso karsana dungal ya yomare girwe dungal ya yomare kyaba dijigi dungal chibure kyaba dijigi dungal ngaso dungal shengi mara dine di tharba re samgira.
So again, problem is if we don't recognize all-pervasive suffering as something as suffering, then it is said. Now let me say about this one. The form realm is divided into 4 dhyana. Again in the English, it has been translated in many different ways. One, I think is best is a meditative concentration, but I don't know how correct that is also. In Tibetan, we have Samden and Tingenzin. So different, these are different. Sanskrit also have different dhyana and samadhi. So in Tibetan word is something, I'm going to use the dhyana, which could be translated in English just meditation state or meditative concentration state or something like that. Anyway, so first of all the gods in the form realm is divided in 4 different categories, which are called the 4 dhyanas. And then now I'm talking about the above the 4th dhyana, and it says there's no suffering of change. So therefore, if you don't recognize the all-pervasive suffering as something as suffering, then you might think above the 4th dhyana of this form realm, then this is liberation, because there is no suffering of change and no suffering of suffering.
Di 인자들은 가서 7월배 dumda kaishiki 상배 고방 탐나 탈바토바 샤기도 되는 거랑서 상배 고방서는 수감로.
So that's the reason why some non-Buddhist believer who are the follower of Brahma, they think if they achieve the state of Brahmahood, then they think this is the liberation, final liberation. But of course, from the Buddhist point of view, this is not the final liberation, but this is just in the form realm.
Las di dine 상배 고방데 수감래 di dila ngaso nyawadan hidala soba dina shingi dine ngaso dokamgi dungaldi yomare dungalgi yomare mato kirwe dungal yora. Dina dine dumda khashigi gare sumyo khamgi gopang topsona tharba thobare samgora karin dila kirwe dungal ya yomara ine dungal nanse tana diyang sibare khamsum khorware dila dine dungalgi dan kirwe dungal menayang dungal tashi khaba dijigi dungal yora.
Okay, so let me go back because I forgot something to say earlier. There is no suffering of suffering and no suffering of change above the 4th dhyana, including above that. Then we have another realm, which is called formless realm. This is called in Sanskrit is arupa dhatu, and then arupa dhatu has again 4 different categories, and this is also free of the suffering and suffering of change. Therefore, whoever are born on those realms, then they believe they're liberated. But anyway, so for those people who believe in Brahma and this kind of belief, then they think they're liberated. But from the Buddhist point of view, of course, they are not liberated from samsara yet, even though there is not a force coarse suffering, which is suffering and suffering of change, but they are not free from the most subtle suffering, which is we call the all-pervasive suffering. Therefore, they are still in the two realms of samsara, or three dhatu. Let's say three dhatu of some samsara. When we say three dhatu, again, this is like we say the desire realm, form realm, and formless realm. So they are nowhere free from samsara yet, because they are in the form realm. Therefore, what they have achieved is not the liberation from Buddhist point of view.
All of these are the Kudingi Loksudla, Sajiki Kabar Kashila, Tabar Zimba Sayadi, Didore, Dungalgi Kabar Kashila, Canum with Tabar Zimba Sayadi, so any Dido, you are. Ingu
So this
Crore, Dungal Rava the Medan Tarba is and the two gore, Kimtin the Garthana, Dungal Tamodi, Dungal in Bamashera, Dijata.
So this is the reason when we say there are also believers who think some contaminated as their liberation. This is what? Because the reason why they have this misunderstanding is because they don't understand the most subtle level of suffering, which is we call the all-pervasive suffering. And when they are free from the coarse level of suffering, then they think they are liberated. So this is what it means when we say there are also people who believe and think that some contaminated things are suffering, which means which is free from some level of suffering, but they are still contaminated, not totally become uncontaminated. And then the problem they have is because they don't understand the most subtle level of suffering, which is we call the all-pervasive suffering.
All of Dido, the name of the Sajiki Kabar Gashila. Dungalgi Kabla Gashi la Tarba in Batrugi, Trishi the Garijum Lanshi, the Nikuranto Dungalgi Dungal Dang Gru Dungal Meva Digare, Negab Dalvarama, then to Dalamaranto. Then Gisi Kuranto, the name Sukam the Sumekana Nebardu, the name Gru Dungal Dan, the name Dungal Dunga Yomaramato, the name Kuranto di then to Dalamare, younger ma, then the Ham Long Sigurado. Karsan Tukam Gigu, Le Dang, Le Sag in Yamong Chazayara Hadora. Yamong Paya Mare. But the Negap Dala in Badi Mashere, Chick Dungal Tomo Mashere, Kimzen Dinilla Dene could the Sarva in Batugar.
So the reason why they misunderstand this state is liberation is because of they don't understand they still have the causes of suffering, because they possess full afflicted the emotion or full pleasures that can produce the truth any kind of suffering. Therefore, after they exhausted their merit, then they can be reborn into the desire realm. So even though for temporary they are free from the suffering and suffering of change, and that's why they are not experiencing the coarse level of suffering. But since they don't understand there is still suffering, which we call the all-purpose suffering, which is the most subtle level of suffering, that they think this is liberation. But that was wrong perception, wrong view, because even though they are temporarily free from the true kind of suffering, but they still have the kleshas, which is the causes of suffering. Therefore, they can be reborn anytime in the desire realm after their merit is exhausted there.
All of that Gogwin number Shiva the Gare Lana, Dungal Sene Tarba Yore, Hine, Tendo Tarba Yomare, Samne, Lobertang Yore.
And then also there is being who perceive in this way. They say, yes, there's a way that we can get liberated from suffering, but this liberation is not like everlasting liberation. There are these kind of people who believe in that way too, and that is the fourth wrong perception about the liberation.
All of did with the Gogdin Lower should be Lokshu number Shigi Nimbola, any Gogding number sheet is not it. Gogding number sheet is class.
And therefore, the four different parts or four different aspects of the truth of cessation is taught in order to antidote, assess for a remedy or antidote for those four wrong perception about the liberation.
All of the Gogding is any Gangla Shasha song. The Gogding is any Nimbi to be Dungal Dung nyumungi seven sebe pangba yara pangba mtalwa di kogden re direbe kogden di number shigi nane dangbo de karla na kogbe number ra direbe kogden di kogbe number chinde dungal pangbe tawa imbe shirs.
So I have already given you the definition or characteristic of the cessation, which is the we say the cessation or the separation from the klesha and karma together at their seed, and sometimes also we say the abandonment pangba in Tibetan, the abandonment of the klesha and karma. So when you completely abandon all the kleshas and karma, then that separation from them is what we call the cessation. And the cessation that, and then out of the four parts or aspect of the truth of cessation, first one is just called cessation. And this is called cessation because they have ceased all the karma and klesha, and they have the separation from karma and the klesha. That's why it's called cessation, because they have ceased all of them.
Oh, da diga so pangwa di yang de lar migi we sul de pangwa ko sare.
And then one thing we have to know here is when we say abandonment, you have abandoned them completely, that it will never give rise again, or it will never come back again.
Oh, la di na si de number ni ba de gare shiwe number ra. Dedebe de nyimbe to gi dungal sebe dungal da nyumong sebe tawa de chejin any shiwe number inde nyumong pangbe tawa imbe shir. Nyumong lar migi we sul de pangwa imbe shir tira.
And then second aspect of the truth of cessation is called pacification, or just Shiva in Tibetan, which means peace, the pacification. And then again here it says this kind of cessation is pacification or peaceful. The reason is because it has already abandoned all the kleshas in the way that it will never come back.
Oh, dedebe de gogwa de shiwe number jingi any tarba de chejin. Number somebody gare kyanumbe number ra. Kyanumbe number inde pembadan dewa 타입의 모르게베 tarba
And then second word, the third aspect of it is, again, there are many different kind of translation in English. In Tibetan words, gyanomba, goshin gyanong nebarjung. Gyanomba, and then one of it says satisfying state. So I think that's quite good. So I'm going to use that. Satisfying state. Gyanomba. So it is this kind of cessation is also a satisfying state, because there are so many different kind of satisfying things of the benefit and then comfort.
Ola. Ta ngiju or ngibar junga namba shiba de ngijungi namba slara. Ta ngibar junga namba sayadi garlamna ta gogden de chejin ngibar junga namba inde ani lar mido be tarba imbe shir. Tarba di engel krowa su chaya ya mares. Tarba di tendu tarba res.
And then the fourth aspect of it is Nepar Jungwa in Tibetan. Again, many different translation. I'm going to use one of them. One of them says definite release. Some also say definite escape, or some also say definite liberation. But I think definite release is quite good here. It's called, it is also definite release because it is a cessation or liberation. This is a hard word for me to pronounce. Irreversible, right? Funny.
Yes.
Irreversible, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is called irreversible liberation, because once you achieve this kind of cessation, then you will never need to go back to samsara. That's why it's irreversible. That's why it's called definite release.
Oh, las. Ta di digo tarba la digo da tarba sena dangbo nga jingde jingwa de tarba la mare. Jingba de dol sona de la tarba la ra. Tarba
So-
ke chigi
So liberation is the translation of Tibetan word tharpa. So tharpa, what means? You are liberated from somewhere. Then from where? Then it says we are first we are being bound, and then when you are liberated from that bondage, then it's called liberation, and that's the definition of liberation here, being free from bondage. So,
the goes the Chingsana Karigi Chimarilana, not the leather Numobi Chumaki Chingdera. The leather Numobi Chuma dele Dora de la Tarvasla.
so when I say we are bound, then if you ask what is binding us, then we says we are being bound by the bondage of karma and klesha. So once we are free from this bondage of karma and klesha, and it's called liberation.
어쨌든 레드 녀몽비 청하기 증당 거르래라노 증슬디 빼는거랑서다 단단 일행기 풍복이 껴와 렌데라고도 껴와 되게 타만 인지미지 쉬고도 마시가 라마미도 시에라 데바 여마레 이네 마시에가 라마미도 시타는 양 껴와 렌고도 껴와 말림베 라마미도 어제바들이 청화선에 뒤로 레드 녀몽바디기 되는 것은 선보 대중에도 시주고도 시선의 양들이 깨와 말린 버제 참 잘 조금도 연결 깨와 끼내를 치료거든. 연행 부모식 가도도 그 연행 부모 현장을 참조거든. 근데 깨타는 양 깨와 제 깨와디 양 마시버제 대중에도 양 시외 쳐서 치료거든. 시선의 양 깨와 참 작음에도 연결 끼내 현장을 참조거든. 이 거래라나 레드 녀모비 칭선의 청원들이다. 레드 녀모비 가서 라운드게면도 인지미지 끼내 찍니 끼내 현장을 치료거든.
And the way how we are being bound by klesha and karma is, for example, as long as we have this perpetuating skanda or skanda of klesha, then there's no way that we can escape from death. We have to die for sure. And then after death, again, there's no way we can just stop there, but we need to take another birth. And these are all being done through the power of klesha and karma. We have no control over them. Nobody wants to die, but everybody needs to die because they are under the power of klesha and karma. Therefore, they cannot control it. And then after death, again, if they even we don't want to get a new birth, but we have no control over it. We have to take some new birth anyway. And this is the way how we're being bound by klesha and karma. We have no power at all over our continuation of life. From this life we need to die. After that we have to take another birth. After that birth we have to die from that birth again. So this klesha and karma is just leading us from different places to different places in samsara. And this is the way how the karma and klesha are binding us. And that's why it's called the bondage of karma and klesha.
Hola, 근데 인디들이 가서 레드 녀모비 치와디 돌소나 근데 가서 깨와다 치와기 콜로디 꼬르고미도 뒤면은 계시기 콜로 꼬르네 되고도 뒤인데 레년기 치와 돌소나더니 깨와래 돌도 그래 깨와래 돌는 나와던 가와 치와라 소베 둥어 신 탐장도 돌도 그래 딜라드링 가서 탈발라 그래스.
So if you get liberation from the bondage of klesha and karma, then we don't have to spin the wheel of life anymore. Then once you are free from the birth, then of course you are free from any other kind of suffering, such as birth, all age, sicknesses, and death, and so forth. And that's why it's called liberation. So if we get if we are free from the bondage of klesha and karma, then we call it liberation because we are free from spinning the wheel of samsara.
Hola, da digi dine gongdingi senjida namba kola ani dodishe sason. Da shiba lamdingi dine senjida namba kola shigire.
So I think I have completed here a concise explanation about the truth of cessation, especially the characteristic or definition and the different aspect of it. Now I'm going to start talking about the truth of path.
Hola. Da lamdingi lamdingi senji karare lamda lamdingi lamdin se da The Lamding thing, Guru Lamdin said, Chilling Musum to Pabe said the Lamdin Sagra. Rangi
So,
Debu, Gogdingi, Gogdin Tobe, Gurugurbe, any changing Musum to Pabe said, Lamdin Sagre.
so the definition or characteristic of the truth of path will be primordial wisdom that realizes the Dharmata, which is the cessation, which is the result of the path. So that's what we call the path of truth. The wisdom that realizes the Dharmata.
Or did a Pagbe said the changing Musum to Pabe said the Lada, Madul Lamden Sigoradini, did a Pagbe said the Ladini, Perse maybe Lamda, number Lamson, Nishagda.
So,
So,
the primordial wisdom of Arya, I forgot that word Arya earlier because the teacher said that. So the primordial wisdom of Arya that realizes the Dharmata is the definition of the path of seeing, the truth of path. And then again, this truth of path is divided into two categories, which is the path of no impediment, Parjime Belam, and path of liberation or perfect liberation. Namdorji Lam. Lasso.
no, the person maybe Lam said the Garam not doing other Tony Musum to Toby she digi any ranking Mogal Gipanga is 7 months upon a chicken zero. Then a person maybe Lambda.
And then the path which we call the path of free of impediment, Parjime Belam, is that part of the wisdom which really actually realize the Dharmata. That part is called the path. That part is called path of no impediment. That's all.
All of the number Lam said then a person Milam Gipanga Pang Simbi Pangba Jira, Pangbala on the king is the number Lamba. Yes.
That's all. Different translation also says the path of unobstructedness or the path of no interruption. But I think path of without obstacle is fine according to the Tibetan word. So path free of obstacles or path without obstacle. That's what Parjime Belam. And the second one is called Namdol Gilam, and that is the part which already Namdol Gilam the kind of song that the Namdol Namdi
Number Lamida Panga Pang Service Jesu, Pangba the Pong the Jigging is zero.
also
Pangba on the jigging is the number lambda res.
Wang to Java songs on to Java.
Or the on the Jiba.
Lasso. So after abandoning all that should be abandoned, then the primordial wisdom which overpower the wisdom is what we call the path of liberation. Lasso.
All us. Did you go something of the Bena? That's a Sadambo to go to Sadambo land and a person melan non near Sadambo Pang Shimbe, Panga Pang Shimbe Negagi, Tony Musum to Veshidi, person melamra, Sadambo Pang Shimbe Gasudini, Ishijira, Nandra, Dinasi Sani, Sara, Panga Pang Shimbe Nega, the Panga Pang Shimbe Nega near. In the Pangsa Pang Shimbidni, Tony Musum to Veshidi. Barsimelamje, Pangjapang Simbekab Gitung Musun to Veshid, Namdolamje, did Osa Rel, Barsimela, Nandolam Niri, Nirijedikazu, then it's such a bebadu, Barsimela, Nandolam near.
Okay, so this is very important that this two part, the Parche Melam is path free from obstacle, and the Namdronam is path of liberation. That's what the dictionary also says. Then each bhumi, starting from the first bhumi, each bhumi has both of them, which means the duration of the time when the primordial wisdom is still purifying or abandoning those that need to be abandoned is called, that part of the wisdom is called the path without obstacle. And then after all the abandoned has been already abandoned, and then the part that part of wisdom is called the path of liberation. So starting from the first bhumi until the third bhumi, each bhumi has two paths: the path free of obscuration and the not obscuration, obstacle, path free of obstacle and path of liberation. So starting from first bhumi to the 10th bhumi, all of these 10 bhumis has these two paths.
Hola, three indications. So lamna shigra, lamna shigra. Then solam don cholam nidi lam ready in a lamde mare songda.
So when we talk about the paths, then it is said that the first two paths, which are the path of accumulation and path of joining or junction, are path, but they are not the truth of path. That's what that is how it is taught.
Hola, still the solam don cholam nidi lamde mai begins and garre lamne lamde ina pangje seven musu pangbe. Persimelam yogo is on that. Person solam cholam la nyumong be seven musu pangbe then persimelam yomara.
So the reason why it is taught that the two first path, the path of accumulation and path of junction or joining, is not the truth of path, is if they are truth of path, then they should also have this path, which is called the path of path free from obstacle, which actually abandoned the kleshas, actually abandoned. But this true path doesn't have that path. That's why they are not included. They are path, but they are not included in the truth of path.
Hola. That the name goes to the Miloblam Yora, Lamgan and Miloblamdi, young Kashi, Kashi is not the Lamde race on the Kashi is in a Lamde Maresondo. In the Kashi, the Lamde Mareson came so Garsungor Lamdani, Kasi Miloblamdi Lamdina, Lamingore, Lamina, Doji, Drupper Jeba Ingo race, Drupper Jeba in a dinner, thank you go home and have a young go home to Eva, Calgres. The Ina young sang you go home. Sangye is in the middle of my Batagres. Doesn't go home deep Komala go home to the Drajayara. Or the name that Lam de Mare, Milo Lamdian, Lam de Mare Sondoa.
Lamden Koramare Songola, Lamsam, but Lamden Koramares or Kashi.
Lamdina, Lamingo res. Lamina, Dribango, Lam is in your Driver Javara. Then Dojo go home with Dragores. As it Driver Javina, Yogores.
Lasso.
Doja Yena didn't.
So there is some different way of saying about the last path, which is part of no more learning. Because usually it says some scholars says this is not it doesn't. The path of no more learning is not included in the path, the truth of path, because it is not path. Because if it is path, then there should be some more destination to go. Path. That path means on which you travel to go to somewhere. But when you are on this level, then there's no more to go. If this is the path, then the Buddhahood should be beyond this one. Then because then you can walk on this path and reach the Buddhahood. But since this is the Buddhahood, therefore this is not path. Therefore this is not included in the to the path. That's how some scholars says.
That did the Lamding, Sini did it. That did it with Sini Jing in Lamdin de la Yang, the name and so number she number she yoga in the garden, Lamdin Lion, Lokshu number she Lokshu number she in Nimbola, De Dokshosu, number she, Lamgi number she son.
And then again, yes, this path, the truth path, also have 4 different aspects in it. And the reason why we have to have 4 different aspects is, again, there are 4 different wrong views about it. Therefore, as an antidote for them, then 4 different aspects of the path are taught.
Hola, Lamding Lokshu she the Garre Lamna. Tarbilam Yene Meba, Tarbilam Tawana Mebertimba, Lodro Chick.
And then out of 4 wrong views, the first one is there are people who think there's no path to liberation, a path of liberation at all. That's the first wrong view.
Lokshu nibadi garasana damya tobi she talama imbatimba.
And then second wrong view is those people who don't believe, or who believe that the wisdom of realizing selflessness is not the path of liberation.
Olas. Tini Lodro sumbadi garilam, tini something ikhabar gashik talam desimbas. Tini ngata chirubagidagi sukham da sungme kham da tarbataguara. Tini da sukham dubegi tingi zinda sungme kham dubegi tingi zinda su tarbe lamda tagira. Tini da tini something ikhabar gashik talam desimbas dire.
And then the third wrong view about the truth of heart is believing some special dhyana or meditation are the path of liberation, which I said earlier. There are some believer, non-Buddhist believer, who believes that taking birth in the higher realm of home realm and such they think this is the final liberation. Therefore, the meditation that leads to this state, they think this is the path of liberation. But therefore, and the third one is believing in the wrong meditation or wrong way.
Ola, di indi lokshu shibadi garilam talam tense diji. Dungal tense diji talam sekonda. Dungal tense diji talam never timba. Dungal tene lar migiwe sudu pang tubege talam yomariyasana. Negab tam pang tubege yore. Ine lar migiwe sudu pang tubege tarbe lam yomariyas.
And that the fourth wrong view about the truth of path is there are also people who believe even though there is some path that can lead you free from suffering temporarily, but there is no path at all that can lead you ultimately free from suffering.
Ola, di inda dine digi doksho la lamdingi namba shi songre. Di inda da lamdingi nga sadela tangmi ngusum togo yeshi di shagora. Da tekwa tumongi lula gansa ki tangmi ngusum togo yeshi di shagora. Di inda dine gansa ki tangmi togo yeshi di lamdingi jidobi lamdingi la namba shi yore songre. Kyoshi, namba shi yore kaza kyoshi shi shara.
So there are four aspects of this path, or you can also say the special qualities of this path, four special qualities. And then again, the definition of the path of truth is the cessation, the wisdom that realizes the selflessness of person. And that's from the common yana point of view, the definition of path is the wisdom that realizes the selflessness of person. And this wisdom has four different qualities or four different aspects.
Di inda dine nga so tangmi ngusum gansa ki tangmi ngusum togo yeshi di ini ore konta lamgi namba shi di dira lam rigba duba ngijin shire.
So let me read one of the translation again. There are many different translations, but I just choose which I think is the most close to Tibetan. So these are the four different aspects of the path of truth. First Tibetan one is just lam, which is just path, and then second one in Tibetan is we say rigpa, lam rigpa ngijin. Rigpa. One translation says appropriate means. I think that's very good. And then Drupa in Tibetan it says actualizing means. And then fourth one is Ngejin. Ngejin, the translation says means for a definite eradication. Kone, eradication, right? Pronunciation, okay? Eradication, yes, eradication means for a definite eradication. And so these are the four aspects of path. At the truth of path. Path, appropriate means, actualizing means, and means for a definite eradication. Masula.
Ola, di inda gansa ki tangmi namba shi di gansa tangmi togo ngusum togo yeshi di la jarna. Gansa tangmi ngusum togo yeshi di shujin. Ini lamgi namba indi tarbe kubhandu dubar jiba indi yeshi dira.
And then first one, it says the self, the wisdom of wisdom realizing this the selflessness of person is path, because it leads you to the state of the liberation.
어디 나시더니 신시 직바로 강사 당면 무슨 도배 시디 체진 릭비 넘버인데 넘버 니바디 릭비 넘버로 릭비 넘버인데 뉴몽비 문인 제베 시대다 뉴몽바로 무슨 니보 제도 그랬어.
And then
방수 그랬어.
And then same again, the wisdom that realizes the selflessness person is appropriate means, because it can become the actual antidote for, or true, I think true, you better to say two, right? Two for, anyway, you understand. These articles are difficult. Anyway, this is called appropriate means because it can be, it is, not can be, it is the actual antidote to clashes.
너다 뉴몽비 세븐 방투 그래 라디가서 뉴몽비 세븐 방투비 김센디 뉴몽바 탐적이 싸와디 당진라 당진기 의기 님보디 그래라나 당명 무슨 도 외시라 어디다 당명 무슨 도 외시디 뉴몽바 탐적이 싸와 당진 랑외스 님보제도 그래요.
And then also say it is appropriate means because it can abandon the seed of klesha. So when we say that, then what is the seed of klesha? Then the seed of klesha is self-thinking or ego-thinking. Therefore, when you have this wisdom that realizes the selflessness nature of person, then there is no self at all. That's why it is appropriate means.
Hola, tiene así, tiene sumbatela. Sisi chibare gansa ga dameng ngosum do tobe shide chejin. Rupe number inde semgi nelu ngosum do tobe shi becher.
And then the third one is actualizing means. So the wisdom of primordial wisdom or Christian wisdom that realizes the selflessness of person is actualizing means, because this is the wisdom that actually realizes the nature of mind.
Hola, shibadi ni ngijing in bare. Any sisi chibara gansa ga dameng ngosum tobe shide chejin. Ngijing in number inde dungal ten to sever jebe lamin becher.
And then fourth aspect of path is called means for a definite eradication. So again the same, the wisdom of Christian wisdom that realizes selflessness of person is a means for a definite eradication, because it is the one that abandons all the suffering forever.
Hola. Ini dah dungal ten to sever jebe lamin becher la. Dungal ten to sever sana dah dungal lar migi itu dah pangtu kore lara. Tagi ngaso lam de la dah perse mebe lam dah namdo lam ni syagda. Ini namdo lam ke pangbala wang tu cegere selara. Ini pangja pang simba de lar loya mebe de gimsan kar sana perse melam yora. Namdo lam yora. Ini dah namdo lam yudi de ne namdo lam ki nyembo di gimna shaba yeza. Ini yang pangja pang simba de yang su loya ki koga mido. Ini dah pangja lar pang simba de lar melo be gimsan di kar sana na namdo lam yebi gimsan.
So when we say the means for definite eradication, then we say that this wisdom is means for a definite eradication, because once we have this wisdom, then it has abandoned all the suffering forever, which means the suffering become irreversible. It never come back. And the reason why it is so is because, as I said earlier, the path again can be divided into two categories, which are the path free of obstacles and free path of liberation. So, and also I have said that path of liberation means the path that take control of the wisdom, which means after you abandon all those kleshas through the path of free of obstacle, then the next is what we receive is we call the path of liberation. And since we have the path of liberation, then it manages that the kleshas and suffering will never come back again. So this is why it says it means for a definite eradication.
All Tidi da barthi milanda namdra lamgi pe shana namgi pe di shagida. Pena ngara zu khangbe nala kuma ji yana kuma di chilo la pi gora. Tidi dini kuma di simne dini go chilo la pi gi dini bezu jidi kasu gare namdra barthi milam di dira gare. Pangja pang shimbe kapsura. Ta kuma di go chilo la ten sana dini nga su go gyagira. Kofar di gyagira. Di namdra lamda gare yasungre da. Namdra lam di dira gare yasungre. Kofar cheba.
So the image or the example that is usually given to illustrate this two aspect of path, the path free of obstacle and the path of liberation is, for example, if you have a thief in your house, then you want to kick him out or her out. The way how you do is first you have to catch her or him, and then you have to take him or her out of your door. And that is what the path without obstacle does. And then once you have already kicked him or her out, then to make sure that the thief doesn't come back to your house, you have to lock your door very well. So locking your door in a very secure way is the example of what the path of liberation does.
Hola, tiki dini dembashigi sini dang any number shire yabadi dini tishe tuzi saswa. Tanga to kaman chunga dini barsam shaya tuzi leswa.
So here we have completed a concise explanation of each of the four truths with their characteristic definition and the different aspect of them. Now it's time for us to have a break for 15 minutes.
Laso dini kaman chunga jila chayong.
Okay, see you after 15 minutes. Lasso, thank you. Okay, it's my breakfast. I will choose later. Okay. Now I'm on. Now I am on duty. Nga dana internet nokta chuni kangpai shaba ju dogo chung. Ya choso la nga choso de nga zo ka tini kamatri ya na choso le na choso dana de internet kore. Tangong log chu ni internet ki de kawa de design ro dana internet. 진짜 지나라 랩데 된다.
Ale drink 어르르르. 카톤 도로 부죠. 드링 도미도 심동도.
가성디 최소랑 드린다 최소 로마 지나는 있나.
알라. 다 시에는 이거나.
어제다 디고서 두소 랩도다. 라슬라. 우세레.
라슬라. 당그래서 가선들이 덴바시 렌숨도 다와래 숨은 그것도 다와 당부들라다 아니 덴바시 몰라 다와서 디바도 누나도 덴바시 모드로 살서
Also,
이모 아데 덴시 모드레
also.
다와 니바데 가르스는 제발라 다와서로
So yesterday when I start talking about the Four Noble Truths, I says Buddha repeated 3 times, or he did 3 recitation of them. This is very Tibetan, the literal translation of Tibetan word. Okay, Debasum. I don't know how much it makes sense in English itself, but we say he did 3 recitation, which means he repeated 3 times. And the first one is he recited on the nature of the Four Noble Truths. And then second one is he recited or he taught on the function or the function is best idea, the function of the Four Noble Truths. So far I think we have completed talking about the first one.
올라스 데바 니바데 상기기 되네 동알 쉐버자 군중 뻥라자 공방군드자 람템버자 송로
Also, and then during the second recitation, the way how he taught was he said, the suffering should be understood, or you should understand suffering, and then the origin should be abandoned, or you should abandon the origin, and the cessation should be actualized, or you should actualize cessation, and the path should be cultivated, or you should cultivate the path. That's the way how he taught during the second recitation.
올라스 다 디기 거르데르라나 상기기 되네 덴바시 냠슬렌술 띵거라
And then this second recitation, the main point is he's teaching us the way how we can practice the Four Noble Truths.
올라스 띠다 다와 당보 가서다 냠슬렌제 덴바시 거레임바데 송로 디 파고 덴바레 디 동알 파고 덴바레 디 군중 파고 덴바레 디 람 파고 덴바레 에스네 단다데다 냠수 간데 랭거 디 띵기도와 람 쉐버 동알 쉐버자 군중 뻥어자 고봉군드자 람 덴버자 송로
So as you know, the way how he taught during the first recitation, he just introduced us the things that we should practice. He says, this is just a noble truth of suffering. This is noble truth of the origin of suffering, and this is noble truth of the cessation of suffering, and this is a noble truth of the path that leads to cessation. And then now, when he said you should understand the suffering, you should avoid the origin of suffering, you should actualize the cessation of suffering, and you should rely on, or you should cultivate the path. And this is actually he's teaching us the way how we should practice them.
올라 드네 이거서 드네 디기 먼저 덴바시기 고림 덴바시기 드네 먼저 덴바시디 가산시버나신다 코르웨 군데당 타르베 군데 니니 여러 디 랍디 가서다 덴바시기 고림 가르레 군데기 고림세나니 군데 고림 말어 군데 고림세나 아니 군중 덴바 당보데 동알 덴바 니바데 람덴 당보데 고데 니바데 거라 가서 교디 당보제 되고 니바영 거라 디 드네 단다 상기기 송에기 덴바시 고림디 군데 고림 말에 가서 군데 고도네 송도와 동al demba tangwa sung kunjung demba niba sungudwa kodin tangwa sung lamje niba sungudwa
So,
kunde grimle godone sungudwa
so as I said yesterday, the reason why he taught 4 of them is each of them is the cause and result of samsara and nirvana. That's why it's but the order how he taught was, then if you ask what is the order of that, because he says he taught the suffering of truth first, and the second the origin. If it is the order of cause and effect, then the cause should be taught first, which means he should have taught the truth of the origin first, and then again with the nirvana also he taught the result first, and he says you should actualize the cessation, which is the result, and then he said you should cultivate the path, which is the cause of the cessation. So it's definitely not the order of cause and effect, because he taught in a reverse way, rather than he taught the cause first and the result later. So then if you ask why he taught in that order,
Olas. Odi the di gorim di Gundegi gorim mare enin lam gulake gorim reyes.
So, so it definitely is not the order of cause and effect, but the way how he taught the order is how we how the path take root in our mind stream. This is the order. Lam Gyule Keba, it means the path take birth in our mind stream. So he taught in the order how the path take birth in our mind stream.
Olas. Ta lam gulake gorim sedi kosadini lam delang so minji gilam dan dolje gilam sniera.
So again, when we talk about the path, then there's two different paths again, which we say the path of maturation, right? Maturation, and then path of liberation.
Olas. Tangbu dolje gilam sedi garere lamna dolje gilam sena ngaso dagi shibanashi. Ani dolje gilam sena ngaso da ngarang se gyula nyomo bitiba da shiji diba yaro. Teni shiji diba le dolwar jikingi eni sangme eshe dela dolje gilam se gore. Pena dagi barshe melam di ngarang so pangje sabi ngu su pang achigidwa. Pangje sabi ngu su pang ne deni namdalam chogdwa. Di inza dine didoge barshe melam na namdalam di gore dolje gilam re sungreda. Tanda pangje sabi ngu su pang tukjengi deni sangme gi eshe dela dolje gilam se gres.
So if you ask what are they, what is the path of liberation and what is the path of maturation, right? Maturation or ripening, maybe ripening is also okay. Ripening, minje in Tibetan. Then, as you know that we have two kind of obscurations, which are the obscuration of the kleshas and cognitive obscurations. So the uncontaminated wisdom that purify the cognitive obscuration totally is what we call the path of liberation. As I said earlier, we have again the path free of obstacle or impediment, parchimelam, and the path of liberation, namdrogilam. These are actually what we call the path of liberation.
Olas. Dor dine ngazo dangme ngusum to be sangme eshe yara. Ta meba am tongni ngusum to be eni sagwa mebe eshe di eni namdro lamre dolje gilam dire. Tigo da namdro lam se gonta namdro lam dolje gilam de. Dolje gilam se namdro lam barsa melam ni ga yungro. Di
So,
dine di da tongni ngusum to basenere da tumongi wangdo jena kansa dangme ngusum to be eshe. Di eni dolje gilam res.
So here I have a little bit different to using the English terminology, because in Tibetan we have two different, namdrol and drolje. But in my dictionary it says in English, same thing in English. It says the path of liberation. Namdrol, if you separate the word namdrol means path of perfect liberation, something like that. And drolje means path that liberates you. This is the meaning of the Tibetan word. But in English they say the same thing. So let me say the same thing anyway. So anyway, in short, when we say the path of liberation, then the uncontaminated, correct, right? Pronunciation. Uncontaminated wisdom, according to the common vehicle, common yanas, then uncontaminated wisdom that realizes the selflessness of person is what we call the path of liberation, or part of that which liberates you. And then according to the uncommon vehicle, then of course the uncontaminated wisdom that realizes realizes the dharmata, the emptiness, and that is what we call the path of that which liberates you.
Oh, last thing that Tulji Lam said it, then Sangme Geshe, changing Dami Musum to within Sangme Eshe, the Tulji Lambre. The Tulji Lam may begin to get around the same beauty. Then Pangje 7, Numum Bitiba than Shiji Dibayara, Dig 7 le 12 Jigingi, Nimbo in Zang, then Tulji Lam Laures.
So in short, again, the uncontaminated wisdom that realizes the selflessness of person, or that realizes the emptiness, is called the path of that which liberates us. The reason why it is called so is because this wisdom makes us liberate from the bondage of klesha and from the obscuration, together with its seed, the obscuration of the kleshas and the cognitive obscuration. That's why it's called the path of that which liberates us.
Hola. Tini da minjegi lamsana garalam dedabi sangme yeshi tobe nirundu jigingi dini lamnam tabji yara. Dela minjegi lam labgare.
And then the second one, the meaning of the path of maturation or ripening is the path or the method that makes us becoming suitable vessel of realizing that wisdom. And that's what we call the path of maturation.
Hola. Tini da any karago. O dini da nirundu chibasana, mimbar chibasana, nirundu chibara. O dini dini ngaso min sayadi karilam ngaso da pina ngaranso na dawa sana. Na di mamin bala ngaso dini tirshana, yang dadung ngaso duru dora. Dini na di mindi kaso tirna dini pengira ko, na tunyala lela bo. Dini digi yang nyangka gegi mare. O diro kaso dini na min siri kaso da toldo rumara di kaso. Pe diro dini ngaso khala ben shingdo min la shingdo de sa ruma chagora pe diro de na so gyu min se di sangme gi lam gomela ne de ruma chade ko gyu min bala ro ti en za de na so na mamin gona tol shana tir shana de na du nyangka ge gere ti na shingdo mamin bala sa shana dogo sha gere ti na gyu mamin bala de ne tolam gom shana tadung de ne madol gangla tadung de ne nyeba mombo 가르쳐보러 아니 니바모 펠시그레스 진짜
So the
귤라기와라 너릉도 제거해야 되겠지만 규민거해야 되겠지만
So the importance of the path of maturation is generally one which is mature or maturation or ripen. For example, if you have a wound on your hand which has pus in it, then if you try to squeeze the pus and take it out when it is not ready yet, then it will hurt you more, and it will damage the wound more, and it will affect more, and then therefore you have to wait until the right time when the wound is ready to be squeezed to take out the pus. Then if you squeeze that time, then you can take the pus out of wound very easily and very comfortable way. And then likewise, now when we say maturation, for example, if you like to have a fruit, then you have to wait until the fruit is ready to be eaten, which means it is fully mature or fully ripened. But if you try to eat the fruit before it is ready, before it's fully ripened or mature, then it could cause you problems such as diarrhea, diarrhea, right? Diarrhea, and then so forth. And in the same way, in order for us as an ordinary being to be able to practice the path of liberation, we have to be ready for that. So, which means that's the meaning what it says. We have to become a suitable vessel for that teaching. Then, what makes us become suitable for that teaching of path of liberation is the path of maturation, and that's the meaning. If we try to practice the path of liberation before we have become ready for that, then it is said there could be possible that many defects or many shortcomings could happen to us if we try to practice that path of liberation before we are ready for that. That's why it's very important for us to go through the path of liberation and path of maturation.
Hola. Tini kaso ngaso dini shingdo di mamin bala sashana dini shingdo la toa yo mare ina subo la negre kyo nyi yara pe dirawa ngaso gyu mamin bala dini tolam gomshana
So, for example, there's two different shortcomings of eating unripened, unmature fruit. First is it doesn't taste good. When the fruit is not ready to be eaten, if you eat that, it doesn't taste good. It doesn't give you the taste that it's supposed to. And the second shortcoming is it may cause problem in your stomach, such as like diarrhea and so forth. In the same way, if before your mind stream become mature to practice the path of liberation, if you try to practice that path, then there could be the same problem. The way of eating unripened fruit.
dungal shebraja, kunjung pangaraja, kobangondaja, sungedi, tene minjegi lam sungre. Tene lam temperja sudikosu doljegi lam dera. Gyu dolwa chigendi lam dere. Tene lam de nyamne jela tangbo dungal she, kunjung pang, kobangondaja sayadi tene, di sumdi kom, tempa tangbo sumdi tene, kom gogre sungre.
So in the same way, gongdang net separate. Tangbo deba tangbo de songso deba niba rang.
Demba shigi gorim jiyara.
Deba sum yorba deba sum yan deba tangbo de songre ba minji.
Mara. Deba dangborang, deba nibara.
Deba niba rang are.
Deba nibara, da dunga shebraja, kunjung pangaraja, lam temperja, kobangondaja sayadi. Mara kobangondaja, lam temperja di, deba nibadra da.
Di minji lam wala.
Deba nibadra.
Ela.
Deba nibadra dine lam gyula kewe gorim dan tumba songare songra.
Ela.
lam gyula kewe gorim sidi kasu minjegi lam dangbo dine gyula kene gyu dangbo minne dine doljegi lam gomgara.
Ela.
Doljegi lam sayadi lam dendra.
La. Deba tang la so deba niba rang la deba tangbo sum
Doljegi lam gyula kela dangbo ngishum ke gora.
Last. Okay, so the way how he taught the second recitation of the Four Noble Truths is the way he taught the path of maturation or ripening first and path of the liberation at the end. And then the first three truth of noble truth, which are the truth of suffering, truth of origin of suffering, and the truth of cessation, are he taught the path of maturation. He said you should understand the suffering, and you should abandon the origin of suffering, and you should actualize the cessation of suffering. These three, when he said that, he was actually teaching what we call the path of ripening or path of maturation. Then when he taught the truth of path, and through this teaching, he taught us the path of liberation or path of that which liberates us.
Di because the ningas of Dango, Demba Dango Sunga Gorim Jira, Digi the Ningasola, Nijunki, Tap Sungore.
So through
yes, nothing as a Gudi, the Nisangweg Lam Gomela, Nedruma.
So yeah, so the reason why he taught the path, the truth of path at the last is he was trying to make us mature through the teaching of the first three truth, through the suffering, origin of suffering, and cessation of suffering. He was trying to make us mature to be ready to practice on the path. Then he taught the path, which is the actual path of liberation.
Las that any or the indicates of the Sangye Tungal Shibraja, Kunjung Ponaja, Kobangundaja, Sungadi, Tene Nijunke, Nijunke, then a tap sungore. The Nijunkia Lada, Gare, Nijun Senachidangare, any Taba Dunya Gilora, Koala, Dene Tungal Tone, Dene, Tanjigi Samba, Koala, Tanjigi Sambadra.
So when Buddha said the suffering should be understood, the origin of suffering should be abandoned, and the cessation of suffering should be actualized, he was teaching us the method of renunciation. Because without having a genuine sense of renunciation, we are not mature yet. Therefore, he was teaching us the method of having genuine sense of renunciation. And if you ask what is the definition of renunciation here, then the definition of renunciation here should be the mind that wants to be liberated from samsara by seeing samsara full of suffering, and also a mind that longing mind for the liberation. So this is what the definition of renunciation here is. Therefore, when Buddha taught the first three truths, saying that you should understand the suffering, you should avoid the origin of suffering, and you should actualize the cessation of suffering, he was giving us the method or the teaching of having a genuine sense of renunciation.
Then because then so nijung kiala nijung sini de ba kiala de di sumga de sam go gore tungal she kunjung pangja yin be she in gobong ndo am gobo tobja yin be she di sumga de she na then nijung sini de ba ke gore.
So once we understood correctly that suffering is something that we should avoid, and then suffering is something that we should know thoroughly as suffering, and the origin of suffering is something that we should avoid or abandon, and there is something called cessation that we should actually actualize. If you know that thoroughly, correctly, then we will have the genuine sense of renunciation.
Olas, tin da de dambo de ngaso de ni sangji chimne de dungal shebar ja songre. Ta dungal shebar ja songre de karelon de ni chidang dungal la khasang shebar na de sum yore dungal gire dungal khabat de gi dungal sum yore. Di nani to dungal shebar ja se shije dungal di khabat de gi dungal de so sum gore.
So therefore, Buddha started teaching, saying you should understand the suffering, or the suffering should be understood. Then, as I said yesterday, there are three categories of suffering, which are the suffering of change, and the all-pervasive suffering. So here, he primarily meant the all-pervasive suffering.
Olas, tin da de ni ti basu da khroala ngijung kies na tagi shibana hedin khroa thada la dungal de thong khroa thada le tol gugu sambe samlo ke gor ma do teni nganso gyagar le tal ne ari la doya da wada teni mara teni gyagar da bai le ari doya da wada yana dokham le dol ne sukham le doya da wada teni mare di do ngi jung digi pheng mare
Lasa.
diga ngi jung diga khwa thada sibde simbo boda sangwa dungal redo samne deni da khwa thada le madul bodu ngone dewa de midu tharwa midu sam khwa thada dungal de thonga ji gogro khwa thada dungal de thonga de la deni dungal shebatam dan girwe dungal shebatam gi phengi mare san deni khwa thada dungal de thonga kheba de ji dungal shengores.
So, in order for us to have the genuine sense of renunciation, it means we have to have the mind of renouncing the whole samsara, not just part of samsara. We have to have a whole genuine sense of renunciation that wants to be liberated from whole samsara, from the top of the existence. Then that's what we call the genuine sense of samsara. Otherwise, if we have only the renunciation from the part of samsara, for example, if you would like to liberate it from India and go to United States, or you want to liberate it from some country in Asia and then you go to United States, or you want to liberate it from desire realm and you want to go to the the form realm, and this is not the genuine sense of samsara, renunciation from samsara. So, in order for us to have the genuine, authentic sense of renunciation from samsara, then just to know or understanding about the suffering of change is not sufficient for us. So in order for us to have this authentic genuine sense of samsara from whole samsara, and then a genuine sense of renunciation from whole samsara, then we must understand the all purposes of suffering.
All us. Oh, the because the thing also Dungal said, didn't Dungal Dungal some down, give Dungal some Samlatana. Any desam did some Madana and then some like a hug were. Then it did them Dungal in Bashina and Croatada Dungal to Tongue to Gumare. The indigo to Dagishiva Nashidini, Krovagi Chokashela Tarva in Batulu, Esmore. Peter Chachana, the Nazo Dungal Chibudi, Dungal in Basamtana, so come the Dungal Yamare, then so come the Talvaredo, some name, full in the Sukam Layang, Sevaki Reson. Then I see the Guru Dungal Chibudi, Guru Dungal in Bashina, they don't get Croatada, Dungal Tongue to Gumare. In Dungal Guru Dungal Meva, then Sukam down some day Shiva the Sala, Tarvaredo, some name. Krovagi Chokashela, Tulbaki, Tarvaim, but Tulbaki cigarettes. The name didn't Kroatada Ladin, Korvaim Bashene, in a Dungal de Shene, in a Detamjela Dolga Tarbatini Bajik Dundu Nergona, then Kroatada Kabje the Dungaldi, Dungali Bashe Gordi, Kabadijik Dungaderes.
So just by understanding the first two aspects of suffering, the suffering of suffering and suffering of change, is not enough to convince us to have renunciation from whole samsara. Because we don't have to think about too much to understand this, the suffering of suffering, because all of we are going through, we are experiencing them. So nobody has to say, this is suffering for you. We all know that. So the confusion we have is the last suffering, which is the all-pervasive suffering. Therefore, merely understanding the suffering of suffering is not sufficient for us to have genuine sense of renunciation from whole samsara, because then you might think there is also, place where it's free of suffering, such as like the rubadhatu or the form realms. And then even the second suffering, which is suffering of change. Again, as I said earlier, above the fourth jhana and the four aspects of the formless are free of suffering of change. Therefore, we might have this confusion thinking that these are the liberation. Therefore, if you really want to have unmistaken longing for the perfect liberation, then we should understand the last part of the suffering, which is the all-pervasive suffering. Then you will know, no matter where we are, from the tip of existence, the samsara is everywhere. The samsara is pervaded by this suffering, which we call the all-pervasive suffering. Then you will have this genuine sense of renunciation, which means you want to be free completely from any part of samsara. Then that will produce you have the authentic, right longing for liberation.
All us. The Indian. Da Kapa Dijiki Dungal Labgo the Young as a Sibi Simone, any Nava Namyaki Bardu, someone like the Tumundu Yeva in Kapa said Dira. Korea Gawain and Digi Makaba Yamare. And the Korova Kabi said them that Devanam Yama in singing Shigidwa. The Koragi Nangla Deva, but the Kabi said them Yamare said Digare. Kapa Dijiki Dungal Yevik in Zera. Dungal Dungal the Giri Dungal Meva Mamudo.
So the reason why this type of suffering is called all-pervasive suffering is because no matter where, from the tip of existence and then to the lowest hell realm, apichi, there is no place that is not pervaded by this suffering. That's why it's called the all-pervasive suffering. Otherwise, there are so many places in samsara where there is no suffering of suffering and no suffering of change. But there's no place at all, starting from the lowest realm of the hell and the top of the samsara, which we call the top of existence. And there's no even a tiny place where it is not provided by this suffering. So we have a saying says, samsara, there is no even a place of that equal to a tip of a needle, which is not provided by this suffering. So as long as it's a samsara, then there is no place at all that is not pervaded by this samsara, this suffering, which is called all-pervasive suffering. And this is the reason why this kind of suffering is called all-pervasive suffering, because it pervades everywhere, from the top of samsara under the lowest part of the samsara.
Hola, still sibi temone narmegi bordo samala tumondu yebe dungal de garre lana nazodani lene nyumo me shamandire esonda nanzo kewa malembe ramamidwa kewa limba yang mashibe ramamidwa shitane yangir kewa malembe ramamidwa dirodani nanzo ramameba kichigi kholo korgoyadi garre ini sibi temone narmegi bordo sumje samala tumondu yore esonda tumondu jesu jelde yore di any capacity to
So again, what makes to have at us that suffering is the power of klesha and karma. So that is called all-pervasive suffering, because as you know, as long as we are in samsara, we have no control over our birth and death. As long as you are born, you have to die. After die, you have to take another birth at somewhere in samsara again. So there is no end of going through to places from place to place in samsara, and that is happening under the power of klesha and karma, and that is what it called the all-pervasive suffering.
Oh, las. Di jedan dine nga zo kepa dijigi dungal tongwe tse di karare lana. Pechana la songdo kepa namla tori kyang nyawa dangsung kyor gyoru songde. Nga zo danda nyawi dungal shena tesa sem kyogudo. Dine ngonto la kepa turgoda ganda. Ngoni kepa dijigi dungal ha gongi di jedam nyawa dang nyansung sumla kyo kepa jedam ngonto ki gopang la yang kyo kegi de songde. Karasana nyawa dang ngonto gopang nye del de ra. Dine ya dwe di maa bhavya chidra. Dine ya gaza zane dega sa dewa surgu mare. Ya bhavya di maa ya zaya di maa bhavya chidra. Dine jidam magi dila dunga surga, dedam yagi dila dunga surga re sore. Kasa di dewa di thongwa ra. Lenyungi dewa di thongwa ra. Pena nga rangsa di ra. Da nga so doji ya namkhala yu na. Dine ngo ko maa zaya ra. Karache nila na gravity yora, gravity. Di gravity ki maa thengi ra kho. Pe dira wada nga su sibi simu badu dhona yang, dini nyawadan dhel dira, dangzin chibara, nga su gyu chibara, dangzin li dhubara. Dini ledu nyungu be chunga di yora, ledu nyungu be gravity di yora, dini sibi simu badu dhona yang yaa maa yunga yara wada. Maa yunga je, dindu dhaya midwa. Dini ledu nyungu be gravity di cross je midwa. Gravity cross maje badu dini maa sayara, yaa dhute sama. Gravity cross je na dini maa saago mara. 디 다음에 방송도 마도 모두 그래비티 크로스 자요 말에 당진기 원도 들어나 그래비티 크로스 자요 말에 디 마젠나 디네 시베스모디양 냐와드르메 델데레 디네 디 통데 가서 디네 케바다서 디 킹이라 디 킨디 디네 제담 냐와라 껴와케바 제담 시베스모 버기 원도래 껴와케기레 말에 디네 껴와케서는 디 가서 케바 디지기 동을 통과하래 손다.
So example which illustrate that how we can understand or how can I see this suffering, the all-pervasive suffering is said that in the text it says that scholar who knows about it will have the same renunciation from the tip of the samsara as they have from the hell realm. For ordinary beings, like for us, when the suffering of hell realm is described, then we, of course, we don't want to be born there, and we have some sense of sadness about that, and then we have some sense of renunciation. We would like to renounce it. We have to be free. We want to be free from there. But we think that if we are born as a human or gods, then it's okay because there is no much suffering like that. But that's not really true because we are not we are not really we have not enough education to understand fully the samsara. Then when we say scholar, because no matter wherever you're born, you are still related with the hell realm. Because the reason when you go up means to come down again. There's no other way. For example, if you throw a stone in the sky, no matter how how powerful you have, how much it goes up, the end of it is coming down. Because the reason is it pull the gravity pull, right? Gravity pulls it down on after the energy is going up is finished, then it comes down because the gravity pull will pull it down. So like same way, as long as we are not free from the gravity of klesha, which is the self-thinking, then we, no matter wherever you go, up or no matter how much high you go in the samsara, you are still subject to coming down, because you will be pulled down one day by the gravity of klesha or and then if you ask when can we be free from this gravity of klesha, then once you realize the selflessness nature, then you will not be pulled down anymore, because you are free from the gravity of klesha. So therefore, to understand the reason and purpose of understanding all purposive suffering is to have genuine sense of renunciation, not only from the part of samsara, but from whole samsara, starting from the lowest part of samsara, which is we call the habitual hell realm, and then the top of the samsara, which we call the top of existence. So once you have the renunciation, when you want to renounce from a whole samsara, that means you understood the all-purposive suffering.
All of the so Sangye Kabadiji Dungaldi, Pesha the Sangye Peji Shani Sungdwa, Pedigarella Nangazuda, Nanzo the Jiding Kamla, Punsun Sobadang, Punsun Sobagi, Gubara, Guba and Punsun Soba Niara, then Guba and Punsun Soba Ni Deldera, then Punsun Soba de Guba Tigra. 나도 저는 그바디 야고 그바디 독자 통과래 분수 소바디 야고 통과라 코로바기 분수 소바디 문제지도 그 코로바기 분수 소바는 그바니데 될려라 빼러 자시나 문투 고방당 년송기 동안 일이 문투 대화당 년송기 동안 일이 될려라 어디인데네 디 찌기찌라 될데 가서 되네 문투 고방당 대화 여디 통소나 근데 지담 년송기 동안라 Kyoa Desam Gidin, Monte Devalan, Kyoa Kegres. Kimsen Garalam, Tini Niensongi Gubadam, Montogi, Punso Nidi, Del Dere, Nidi Monte Punsogi, Tadigar, Niensongi Gubayamare, any Niensongi Guba, but Nimogi just member Shaggy, Samo Younger, Samo just member Younger, Koragav Degra, the Nimo lessons and Hajan Gago, then it's Samo, the Jesus Samo Legra, or Pay the Chivare. 디인데 그바 탐지기 싸와디 분수소바 탐지기 싸와디 그바래였습니다. 디인자들이 지딩 분수소바 지담마도 그발라 마가와 대담 디니기 대화디 하거나 지담들이 그발라 교학계와 대담기들이 분수소발라양 교학계기래였습니다.
So the example that was given by Buddha is the samsaric perfection, which means the samsaric pleasure. Let's say the pleasure, samsaric pleasure.
Pedi, tanda shaya juma.
Lasso. So not the example yet. So anyway, the teaching here is, the end of all samsaric perfection or pleasure is decline, right? Decline or degenerate.
Yes.
So we can say we are trying to have perfection in order to have decline, because the end of perfection is decline. There is no other way. And same way, if you know the all perfect suffering very well, then you know all the pleasure of higher realm. The end of that is the suffering of lower realm. Because it's just cyclic thing. It goes up and comes down. For example, we have day, and then it's sure that we also have night. So after night, we have day again. So therefore, there's no much reason for us to be so happy to have day and so unhappy to have night, because it comes one after one another in this same way. So therefore, if you know this relation very good, very well enough, the relation between the pleasure of higher realm and the suffering of lower realm, then as much as renunciation you have from the suffering of lower realm, you also will have the renunciation from the pleasure of higher realm, then that means you have the good renunciation from all samsara.
All us. The Sangye pay the girls from the Lamna. Any Tashima Sajero, Tashima the Nanamasan. Nanamasan Tamishibara.
So,
Any Sangye pay the girls from Lanima, Yama, then Mizanchi Gola. Mizanchi Gola, the music knock Jazara.
so
Knock Jadi Kundu Gochika Rodicos, Gotila, then Bume, number Sebo, Station Hidon, Kanchata, or Tenisic Tongres. Then Bumudi Gorilla Lana, naming La Tashima Lagres. Then now Mizan Gawa, Donate, Mizan de la Pay, Trashiba, Lole, Pay away on grace. Logical Satan, Mizan, oh, Yape, and could the pay car. Then Yam Kondo Kamba pull a tree, then think to the gap, then it paid Dariga Wajera, Nele Wajera. Then you crown the son of the Trashima Kondanala, Kondo Tashi Lole away on grace. In the age but the taste gelatin, younger go till a knock jeres. Then Kondo young Gocha do the Gosu, go the city, young Bume, Miduba. Don't give a chick, Tonresa. Then Bumadi Garla, Nagi Mingla, Nanama Segres. Then Nagawa, Dona di Mizandula, then a Tramishiba, then a pay Barche, Tramishiba Shada Yungres, La Resa. Then Mizandi, oh, Pagus and Pishares. Then Nama de Garla, Nadra Yomare, Tashima and Narani, then Legida, Talmeres. Talia Yomares, Tashima Gavata Sala, Nalea in the Trinity study. Nani Talsa Yomares, Legi. Odila Digo said, Nadovana, Tashima Pigore, Tashima Shagona, Naya Shagores. Oh, the Sangye Sunga the Garlana, the Mizandi, Tashima Pituguamara, Nanama Yongchuamara. The manager, the Kuni Dalmera, then Nanama Tiang, Tashimara. Tashima Yonta Nanamalera, Tashima Mayana, Nanamalea Yamara. The Kurangi that Tashima the Yabusi, Nanama the Tujasi, and Nanama Tashima the Yasha, Toshijere. Zero Jay, Kuni Catals of Yamara, Lake Tashima Gavadosala, Nanama Duare. Jetan Kuni Catals of Mido. The Tashima Pugona, Nanama Pugona, Tashima Pugore, Nanam Tashima Shagona, Nanama Shagora. The Jiding Putu the Goduna, Gubaya Shagoda. Or the Gansu, Guba the Mugo, Punto the Ghost the Tanga Yoma Resunda. The Lizigazu, Kore Punto Tamyang, Tamjagan, any Guba Tamja Tiagi, Nilin Nadendra, Nadingere, or the Devadi Hagona, Legi Devadi, then Kore Punto Tamja Lang, Kyoki Grace.
So the example that Buddha gave here, how the all samsaric pleasure can lead to the misery of samsara, or Tibetan word is decline or degenerate, kupa means. So anyway, in simple English, we can say how all the samsaric happiness is related with the samsara suffering, and how we cannot separate them. Yeah, we accept the happiness and we reject the suffering. We are trying to do that way, but it's impossible as long as we're in samsara. And the example he gave was in the ancient time, there was a family, and then one day someone knocked. There was a knock at the door on that family, and then when they opened the door, there was a beautiful lady who was very nicely ornamented with many different ornaments. And then she says, "My name is Auspicious Lady." So wherever I go, there will be so many auspicious things, so many things. And then of course the family was very happy, and they welcomed him with full respect, and they treated him, not her, they treated her very well, because they all the family wanted all the auspiciousness that is available, you know. So then after a while, there was another knock at the door. Then when they opened the door, then there was an ugly looking lady, and who says, "My name is Nanakma, and then wherever I go, there will be all the unauspiciousness, inauspicious or unauspicious? Inauspicious. Oh, inauspiciousness. Then the family, of course, tried to kick that lady out as soon as possible from their door, and they didn't let her in. Then she said, "You cannot kick me out, because I have this karmic connection with the ladies of auspiciousness. So if you want to keep her, then you also should accept me. There's no way that you can separate two of us together. So in this, example, you can see because the who was leading or bringing this inauspicious lady to your home is the auspicious lady, which means, if you want the auspiciousness, then also you should be ready to accept the unauspiciousness also. Because if you say, I just want the auspicious lady and I don't want the inauspicious lady, there's no way at all in samsara, because they are related by karmic in this way. So that's how Buddha said, you should, if you say, I want all the good things in samsara and I don't want any bad thing in samsara, and there's simply no way for you that. If you want to have all the perfection, all the pleasure, happiness in samsara, then also you should accept all the suffering, all the things that makes you hurt, that hurts you, and then simply there's no way to separate them, because this is how they're related. This is the meaning of that example. Therefore, the main thing is that we should have renunciation not only from the suffering of samsara, also we should have renunciation of every kind of samsaric things, whether it's samsara or perfection, samsaric pleasure or samsaric suffering. We should be renounce all of them.
Hola, tiene que ser Sangye que son que combate carrelana, corve punsun sobadi, mune punsun soba maresleta. 그러던 corve punsun sobadi 구박에 싸워 차기도. 어떠니 인도가서 내가 점게 분서를 마도 아니 문에 드니 된다며 분서지 말아야서.
So the meaning is here, the samsaric perfection or the samsaric pleasure is not the ultimate pleasure. That's what the teaching Buddha. That's what the message Buddha would like to give us. Because the all samsaric pleasure, perfection, whatever we think good in samsara is just for temporary. Because it brings you the decline. It brings you the suffering at the end. That's why it is not like a real perfection or real pleasure or real good things ultimate, which is everlasting. And that's the message here. Because the reason is any kind of samsaric pleasure or perfection will lead you to a suffering or decline or degenerate at the end.
Hola. 티인디드니 상계기 송에데 거래라나 코로에 분소데드니 문에 분소 말에 인 코로에 분소데 거래 분소 문에 분소 많이 비긴다 가서 구박에 싸워 차고 하래. 구박 탐지게 싸워 차고 하래. 이내 코로에 분소데 나 신차기는 구박 싸워 차기래. 코로에 분소들라더니 구박에 싸워 임바통네 아니 내중께나 코로에 분소를 때네 직전에 대비 분소 탈벽 고반 두개기 니버지여래. 디 코에 분소 양다와더라. 다 나라서 코에 분소도 출내 심박계성나. 디니 코에 분소들라 탈베 람두개기 디니 니버지 예버디 통투고 말해 가서. 디인자들 상계성나 코에 분소도 출려야 말해. 코에 분소디 내가기 분소 좀 임바하거나 내가기 분소디 교진에 탈수기 분소 두트에 고갑이어래요.
So then again, important thing here, the teaching of Buddha, what he's trying to give us message is that we should never perceive the samsaric perfection or samsaric glories or samsaric pleasure. The punso is very hard word in Tibetan. It could be translated in many different ways, So I'm using many different English words. You can say samsaric pleasure, samsaric perfection, samsaric glorious, or samsaric fortune, whatever. So the message here is we should not perceive it wrongly, thinking that this is the real glorious, this is the real pleasure, this is the real perfection. If we perceive them in that way, then it will lead you to the suffering, and that is a big problem. That's why it says the samsaric pleasure or glories or perfection is not ultimate perfection, because it will lead you, and then if you perceive them, you believe them as something being the real perfection, then you will have a problem. But good thing about this, good thing about samsaric pleasure is that if you perceive them in a right way, thinking that they're understanding that they are not really the real perfection or glorious or pleasure, but they're just for temporary, then relying on that understanding, then you can achieve the real perfection, real glorious, real pleasure, which we call the pleasure of nirvana, or pleasure or glories of nirvana, or perfection of nirvana. So the good thing about samsaric pleasure is to understand them being just for temporary pleasure, and renouncing them as using as our path on them, renouncing them, then we can achieve the everlasting, the real perfection or glorious or pleasure, which we call the pleasure of nirvana. And that's the good thing about the samsaric pleasure. Otherwise, if you believe them as a being real pleasure, then that's a big problem. Is that clear?
Hola. Odini da khaba diji gi dungal di. Tunda midajing shawame midajing rawame bade gare khaba diji gi dungal re.
So therefore, the all pervasive suffering is said to be impermanent and is not autonomous, or it doesn't have power. It's not independent. It is dependent. Yes, it is not independent. Yes, that's all.
Hola. Tinda Korea punto scientaji, Korea punto na punto chesu CBC mo 공부 들어와. CBC mo 들어와. 시대기 대화 들어와. 어디 이제 Korea punto 현다 다쇼 CBC mo 공부했다고 양 동아리인데 선 되고서 미드 버저에 내인데 이교 버저에 내인데 디가 동아리 된디라 이교 버저에 내인 바데 이교 버저에 내인데 계직 말을 기지기 자와집의 수익이 균세는 세세를 한다. 세세는 시고라. 신의 엠겨wallen 거라. 겨와신달라. 어디 이제 겨와디 마 되감 나나든 되감게 털도 녀와 나면 겨wallen 시그라. 내가 네가 열어. 어디네 가서 어디네 기직 말을 해신 기지기 자와집의 거니 하루 균세대 동안의 현재 3절로 예실 김센데 데려다. 미다징 샤마메 바사야 되더라. 라마메 바사야 돼.
So when we say samsaric pleasure or samsaric perfection, then as I says the sipizemo, which is the top of the samsara. Again, there's some different translation, or some says summit of existence. From the Tibetan word, sipa is existence and the zemo is summit. Some says pinnacle of existence, and some just say peak, the peak of the peak of the existence. Anyway, this is the highest part of the samsara, where the most samsaric pleasure is available, for example. And then again, when we say the all pervasive suffering, the definition of it is impermanent and is dependent. It doesn't have self-power, which means is even the pleasure of the pinnacle of existence is propagated by this suffering, because it moment by moment the lifespan of the birth that they take there is exhausting, which means moment by moment they're approaching or nearing to the death. Then after death, it is possible for them to be reborn again in the lowest part of the samsara, which has different. I just will maybe use the Sanskrit apichi, or some also said unending torment, the hell of unending torment. But anyway, this is the lowest part of the samsara. So let's just say those beings who are born in the top of the samsara or pinnacle of existence, after their lifespan is exhausted there, and there's possibility for them to be born even in the lowest part of the samsara. And then how it is happening is each moment of their lifespan is taking them to the nearer and nearer to the exhaustion of their lifespan in that realm. And that's why this is called impermanent and dependent.
Olas. Tito Tondi goes to the Dagi Lavanashida. Kavanamla, Turigan, Neva Dansum Kyor Gilsonra. Kava de la Turi de Yang, Neva Dansum Kyo Kigre said. Kava de Jigdungal Son et Diresonra.
And that's why the quotation I gave you earlier, for the scholar, for the learned, even in the pleasure of the pinnacle of existence will be equal as the suffering of the lower realm for them, because they understand the end of that pleasure is nothing but the suffering of lower realm. And then this is the kind of example of understanding understanding the all-purposes suffering, that no matter where you are born, all part of samsara is pervaded by this suffering.
Olas. Didova Tongna, Didova de Kava de Jigdungal de Tongna Denis. Kamsum Kro Tamjela. Dini Higyo in this Chibatungre. Dini Kamsum Kro Tada le Taleg some located. Samsung Cho Chine, Talne Cho Chilla, some of the Kurgamara.
So, if you understand clearly the meaning of this suffering, which is called the all-pervasive suffering, then you will see, no matter which part of samsara, you will see equally as a subject of sadness, which means you don't have any attachment to be born there. Otherwise, of the samsara, the 12 realm, the desire realm, rupa realm, and arupa realm, you will have the same feeling of the sadness, seeing that this is a subject of suffering or sadness, and then you will have the real sense of renunciation from all part of samsara, and you will be not you will not be attached to any of them. Otherwise, if you want to renounce from some part of samsara and you want to born in some other part of samsara, and that is not the real renunciation, and that means you have not understand the meaning of all-pervasive suffering.
Ola. Ta Dirvidina Kora Tada Dungal Imba Kava de Jigi Dungal Tongne, any Kora Tada Dungal Imba She, any Kora Kavi Tetam Devano Yabama Imba Shene, Ta Kora Tada le Madul Badu. Dewe Gogabsan and Midu some that Croata le Dolgodu, some Besano, Dungal Sundu Dolgodu, some Besano Magia Misibara.
So once you realize, no matter where, the whole samsara is pervaded by this kind of suffering and is full of suffering, then there's no chance for you to not to have the mind mind of longing to be free from samsara. When you know there's even a tiny place equal to a tip of a needle, there's no place in samsara where there is no pervaded by the suffering, then you will naturally have this genuine sense of the renunciation, because it is impossible for you not to be not to have mind of being free from the suffering.
Olas. Ta Dirvidina Croata Dungal Imbashini, that Croale Dolgodu, Croale Madul Badudini. O Deve Goga Midu, some of the Koale, Chinigan, Tolgudu, some Besomaki, in Zimbanibadi, Tol Tugure Maridi, Duara, Tol Gugi, the Hagoda, Tugure Maridi, Duara, question mark, Radi.
So,
Tol Tugure Maricheva Sugar,
so after we have full understanding of samsara being full of suffering, then you will have this longing of being free from samsara. But the next question is there really a way that we can be free from this samsara suffering? Now we know that samsara is full of suffering, and we don't want to be there because we don't want to suffer anymore. But the next question is there really a way, a method, a path that can lead us out of this samsaric suffering? And that's the second question here.
Ola. The Duadi, Sem the Shardigo, the Crowale, Dungal, Tol Tugu, Cheba the Gardamarana. Crowa the Dungalgi, Jesu Dungaldi, Kure Dungaldi, Korangi Gui Jesu Dodo Jigidua. The Dungal Pang to Metu, Gu Pang to Metula Ralegra. Dungaldi, Gudi Mama Jedine, Dungal di sarma tamba nahi tanya ya mara. Nada sarma suna sarma ki gyu tago mara. Sarma kona sinni pi chokora. Dungal di dito piya ya mara. Dungal di pango na dine dungal gyu ki jesu tosa chigido di na gyu pang togo mido dila rala gira. Di gyu di pang togo mido gyu gara redo di cheba shukura ya suna.
So then the answer for this question is, what is the cause of this samsaric suffering? We have to investigate that, because without having abandoned the cause, we cannot be free from the result. It is not something that when we have a thorn on your feet or somewhere, then we can just check out the thorn. Then you don't have to go when this thorn comes. What's the cause of? You don't have to examine that way. But abandoning suffering or samsara is not that way. It doesn't work in that way. Just check out it, and it is done. But you have to investigate and find out what is the origin, what is the causes of this suffering, in order for us to be liberated from the result.
Oh, las. Tiene cosas de ninguno. Dungal gyu garu redo tadi de ngato kunjung de ba khang shera. Dungal de ne lele de yungdu le nyumong sagidu. Tini nyumong la yang jamba mambodu. Tini de nyumong jamba de ne dona. Te tsawa de dangjin le thogudu. Tini de cosas de ni kunjung tham je ge tsawa. Dungal gyu kunjung redo kunjung tham je ge tsawa de dangjin mari bola thogudu. Ibadu de ni gyu cheba shugura. Tin tharduk dangjin mari ba yamba shedi gosuda. Tini dungal pang mabang kunjung pang mabang la rala gede kunjung pang mabang dia kunjung zawa dangjin pang mabang la rala gitu ti hagu da ti dangjin pang tu gure mare dil rala gitu da dungal pang tu matu di dangjin pang tu matu la rala ba yamba di hagu ra.
So then when we investigate or examine the causes of this suffering, then as I taught yesterday, the second truth is the truth of origin. And then again, we will find it out that all suffering comes from our own action, which we say karma, our karma, and karma is accumulated by our klesha or the afflictive emotion. Then out of many different kinds of kleshas, the root of klesha is self-thinking or ego thinking. Then if we can avoid the origin of suffering, then we can avoid this suffering. Then in order for us to avoid or abandon the origin of suffering, then we have to uproot the root, which is the self-thinking. Therefore, it's important for us to realize the selfless nature.
Hola, Dini kaso da kunjung pang mabang diyan kunjung thamje ki tsawa di ini kunjung di kandis yungu di le di kandis sare nimong gawa ni jungre nimong la mangbo yore mangbo desu thangma kandis jungre di dini cheba tang di kaso nimong thangma kia ki tsawa yang dini dangjin re du dini zan dini kunjung pang mabang di dangjin pang tu mitub la ra le ki du dini zan dangjin pang tu gare mare di cheba ra da dangjin pang tu gare mare di cheba ra di 남성 빵그리 라편은 팽 말아. 디디 당디 빵 도바도 가래도 디쳐봐 쇼거라. 디디 당디 빵 두그래 말해. 디쳐봐라.
So second question is here. Now we are here that we understood after examining or investigating the causes of suffering, we found it out that suffering came from karma, our own karma, and then also we know now that karma was accumulated by our own klesha, which is our affliction emotion. And then out of many different kinds of kleshas, the root of klesha is the self-thinking. So as long as we have this self-thinking, there's no end of suffering. And then if we can avoid or abandon the self-thinking, then that's the end of suffering. But here again, question is, can we really avoid or abandon self-thinking or not? Can we really realize selfless nature or not? This is the question here now. And we have to investigate or examine that. Is there really a way that we can realize selfless nature?
No, alas. Tiene dangjin pang tu mitub la dani cheba tang de gaso dani dangjin pang tu mitub de gar ta gore lam. Dangjin gi jindang gi yul then la yore mare. Masa Tangjin digi nga rangshing to Bajing to. Chetan nga rangshing to yore mare, de la rale gres. Kasi nga rangshing to Bayana, Tangjin Pantu Mares. Didn't Tangjing is in Dang Yuldi, then la Shugna, then la Yena, then Tangjin Pantu Mare. Tangjing is in Dang Yuldi, then la Mebaje, or Trulli Tongyana, then Tangjin Pantu Gre. But the Tangjin Pang to Method Chabadi, Tangjing is in Dang Yul, then la Yore Mare, de la rale gres.
So then the answer here is whether we can abandon self-thinking or not depends on if there is a real existent self or not. If there's a real existent self that exists real, then there's no way we can avoid thinking it as a self. If there's no self in reality, and then our self-thinking is just a confusion, then yes, there's a way that we can avoid, because this is just a confusion. And in reality, there's no self, which we think is a self. So this is, again, we have to investigate or examine if the self really exists inherently or not.
All the Kasi Lodi Pang Tugre Maresadi, Logi 7 Pang Tugre Maresadi, Logi Sindangi Yuldi Nelula Shuma Shuk Dilla Alegres. The Logi Sindangi Yuldi Nelula Shuna, Tini Lodi Pang Tug Mares. Karesalanga, Sindangi Yul Dela Yena, De Sinking Lodi, Deni Sindangi Yul Dela Shuna, Deni Sindangi Yul Dela Shuna, then Lodi Sindangi Denda Tumbashure. Then the Tumbashuna, then Lodi, then the Tumbashuna, then Tangzingi, Die, everybody, Lodi Rangshin, Tumbashupare. The Lodi Rangshin Pantumara, Sawaye, May, Sawa Meva Sotumara, May, Sawaya Yungrada, Sawa May Rangshira. Didn't Kasi Tangzingi, Sindangi, you the Jena Yena, they sympathy Lokrang Rangshin Chagres, but the session to Valoy Senilara. Yulla Kare Yabadi, Siadi, some Krang Rangshira. Yulla Kare Yabadi Log is Ingiduna, Lodi responsible. Made on Sawani Talme Manashi, any Tadu Zimbadi, same Krang Rangshi Chagres. The same Krang Rangshin the Del Sigmara, or the Neza, Tangzim Pang Sigmare, Tida, Tangzim Pang to Metodi, Kim the Dishina, and Tangzing is in them, Tell the Sugar Maradilla Ralegres.
So again, whether we can abandon self-thinking or not depends on the self really exists or not in reality. If self is something that really exists inherently in reality, then the mind which perceives self is an unmistaken mind, and that is a part of the nature of the mind. Therefore, there's no way we can separate the nature of mind from the mind itself, because it is perceiving something in a correct way. But if the object of the self-thinking mind, which is self, doesn't exist in reality, that means this is just a confusion or wrong perception of the mind. Therefore, the self-thinking mind could be avoided. For example, is the fire and the heat. If there's a fire, and then you can separate the heat of the fire because they're same nature. The heat is the nature of fire. If you say, I want a fire, but I don't want heat, it's impossible. Like that, if the object of that mind really exists in reality, then the thinking of that mind, the notion of that, the part of that mind which cleans itself, is also unmistaken mind, and it's become a nature of the mind. Therefore, we cannot avoid the self-thinking. But if the self doesn't really exist inherently, that means the self-thinking mind is confusion. Then it's possible for us to abandon that. For example, when we say the definition of mind, it says the definition mind in Tibetan is Rigpa, which means the clarity and awareness, or clear and aware is the definition of mind. So something, the mind cling as something unmistakably, then that means it's a nature of mind, then we cannot avoid it. That means if the self really exists, and then we cannot avoid the self-clinging, because it is unmistaken mind. But the self doesn't exist and mind thinks it exists, then that is a confusion of mind, and it is possible for us to avoid self-thinking. Clear?
All awesome. Oh, the because that Tangjin Pang to Mizu, and Tangjin is Imbanashing, that do your mare, Tilarale or that do Yemel Chavashu, any Dameva Hagosona, or Tangjin didn't, Fulveloredu, TND, any Dameva di To Gom, any Della Sanang Ten, Mosum the Tosona, Tangjin is 7 the Pang to do, then Pang to Vela, Tangjin Pang to Vela, Hishigere, Digasu. Tangjin Pang gone dine nyomong dang le samayang pang thupala isi kegre ti gasu dine kunjung pang gone kunjung pang thupala isi kegre sunde ti da dine ti da sangye ge dine kunjung pang ra ja sa niba sungya de dire namsang kunjung pang do gre sungya mara kunjung pang jai ba she gre sunde ti gasu.
So now our job is to examine or investigate if there is really a self that really exists inherently in reality. We have to investigate that. Then once we find it out that there is no self which really exists inherently in reality, then we will understand that clinging self is a confusion. And therefore, then also we will understand there is a chance or possibility for us to avoid the origin of the suffering, which is klesha and karma. And then after, and then understanding that if you meditate and you become more familiar with no self, then your realization of selfless will deepen. And then this way, then you will have the certainty that you can really avoid the karma and klesha, which means you can also avoid the suffering forever. So therefore, it is important for us to investigate and then examine if the self really exists or not. Then we will find it out it doesn't exist. That's the reason why Buddha said the origin of suffering should be avoided. He says it can be avoided easily. He didn't say that. He just said you should abandon the origin of suffering. That means this is a process how you can abandon the origin of suffering, which are karma and klesha.
All awesome. Ti da kunjung pang ra ja sungedi tine dungal shebe de lamsang kunjung pang do gre di lagwa mara ta dungal pang go du sonde ko pang tu gre mare di tine kunjung pang tu mi tu ra la ba ba cha ba shu ro di ko su ta dungal di kunjung gi debu yin ba shi di kunjung pang ja yin ba she de la da sangye gi sunde kunjung pang ra ja se de gre kunjung pang ja yin ba shen gre so re da kunjung pang ja yin ba she de la ren ba ni yo ra kunjung pang go bar she ba dang pang ni bar she ba ni yo ra di dangbo dungal pang go du sam dungal di kunjung gi debu re she de ko su ni kunjung pang go du san pang ja yin ba she pang go ba she da pang go ba she ne pang ni mi ni re che ba shu ra pang ni mi ni re che ba she di ini kunjung ta dangjin de thurba yin ba she de ko su ni pang ni ba she da 어디 이제 빵 괴바도 빵 니바 니가 세대더니 빵 투그를 했으니 계제게다 뭐 이시 계기도 이거서 빵장이 몇시라다 빵 투게도 빵 고고도 빵 니게도 드니 빵 고고도 디 셰파디 람삼 디거서 빵기도 말아 히네 빵장이 뭐디 시기도 디거서 디 셰바 똑바디 드니 림바니발에 계기도 디 람로디 님네로디 규민지기 타로디 어디 인상 상계기 드니 니바디드니 군중 방어를 자서야디 군중 방장이 몇신 거래요.
So when Buddha said the truth of origin should be abandoned, or you should abandon the truth of origin, it doesn't mean that after knowing, understanding the truth of suffering, you can avoid it right away. It doesn't mean that. So there is two things. After knowing the suffering, understanding suffering very well, then there's two things that you have to know about the origin of suffering. First thing is the origin of suffering is something that should be abandoned. And then second thing is the truth of origin is something that can be abandoned. So even if you should abandon them, the next question will be whether you can really abandon them or not. Then this is So then after examining thoroughly, then the root of the very root of the origin of suffering is self-thinking. Then when you know the self-thinking is nothing but just confusion, then you will have full certainty that you can avoid the origin of the suffering. Now, it doesn't mean you can avoid right away. It is just understanding, just knowing, and which means you already started practicing. So that's why it is something that is making mature our mind. So therefore, it is the part of maturation.
Olas, tin de gasa kunjung pang dungal gi gyuin be gyum tengi kunjung pang go bashe ani kunjung di chulba yin be gyum tengi pang ni bashe tene pang go ba da pang ni ba ni ga shi de gasa tene o kunjung pang go do sambe songlo ge gira tene kunjung pang sona tene kunjung pang go ni dungal dan dal go ba yang thodo ro re do tarba o din de tene tarba tolung yin ba yang ji ge gira tarba ye ba dang tarba thodo ro yin ba la ji ge gire di gaso di la ngejung la da ngejung se de go ni do dungal le dal go ba she dungal le dal do ro she dungal le dal go ne go ba thob do ro go ba ye ba ye she go ba de thob do ro yin ba ye she di gaso de ni go ba ma thob ji gi min sam be song lo yung ma ra di gaso de ni ge ji ga tam ba dungal le dal go den thob go do sam be song lo ge ra di da sang gi sum ba de la go ba ngon de ja song ro ma do se le di gaso lam sang go ba de thob je go re sung ya ma ra 고버 토론인 바데 신고 그래서 어디 가서 이단들이 고버 토론인 바세나 토바지기 인삼베 삼로 계기라 토 고버도 토 들어온 이가 세나 토바지기 인삼베 삼로 계기래 딜라드네 디가서 내중 용수도 바데 계고 알아다 내중다 탈바든 얘기로
So after that, then we will know, after that Buddha said the cessation should be actualized or achieved or attained, or you should actualize cessation, or you should attain a cessation. Then after thorough investigation about the suffering and the cause of suffering, and also there's a possibility that we can avoid the origin of suffering, which is self-clinging. Then next he says you should actualize the cessation. And that gives us understanding of there's something called nirvana or cessation that we can achieve. So you will get the certainty of the attainable of the cessation. Then, of course, when you know through your practice, there's something called nirvana that you can achieve, then you will have genuine sense of longing for it. You would like to achieve that cessation, the nirvana, through abandoning in the second truth, which is the origin of suffering. And then this, when you have this kind of mind, and that is the perfection of, we say, the measure of perfection of the true renunciation from samsara.
Hola. 어디 가서 되니 이중 코로라 교학에 아니 달 거바단 달리 바니가시 디인데드니 달리 바니가시 디인데드니 동안라 달 군중 방어권에 동안라 달에 살바 톱 거바 동안라 달에 살바 톱 거바에시 되니 군중 방어권에 동안라 달에 살바 톱로민 바에시 어디 가서 되니 동안라 달네 harba ngibar tu thoba chigi sambe dine samlo am ngejung senare harba dinir senare tirwe dine lo chema mainba kegire ti gasu dine nganso gi semji garere lamna lam gomegi ne durunga chagware gi lam gombe nurung chagware lam gombala gi mimba chago mingware.
So after knowing this very clearly, that there is a way that we can get liberation from samsara, and then it is possible to achieve the liberation, which is free from all samsaric suffering and so forth, then we will have this uncontrived mind of longing for that kind of cessation, which is free from the samsaric suffering, or you can also call the uncontrived mind of renunciation, which would like to get free from samsara as soon as possible. When you understand fully that samsara is full of suffering, and that there is way that you can get liberation from here, and then you can achieve it through the practicing on the path. Then you will have the uncontrived longing for liberation and uncontrived renunciation from samsara, and that kind of mind is called the maturation of our mind to practice the path, which means we become the right vessel to practice the path, and this is what we call the maturation of our mind stream.
Olas. Tindi da dedo dungal dan dalwe gogba di kanis thogor lamna kunjung pango do. Tindi kunjung pango ne dungal dan dalwe gogba thogor ma do. Kunjung mabang bala dungal dan dalwe gogba thogya mi do. Odi indi diga su samlo di chatang yara. Di lagdi ga su da dungal dan dalwe gogba thogya yare ine kanis thogor do kunjung pango ne thogor do. Kunjung gare ki pango re. Odi indi lam gogora nyembo lamla dine pango re. Tindi da dine lam di delba di thongro di ga su do lam gom do sambe samlo di gegira. Sangye chumdendegi shibadila lam temperja.
So now we know, now after all this, now we know there's something called cessation, which is free from suffering. And then the way how we achieve or actualize that cessation is no other way but only through abandoning the truth of origin. Without abandoning them, even we understand there is something called cessation, there's no way we can achieve that. So knowing that there is something called cessation, which is complete freedom from samsaric suffering, and the only way to achieve that is through completely abandoning the second truth, which is the truth of origin of suffering. And now, then how? That's the next question, how we can abandon. How even we know there's a cessation that is free from samsara, and then the way how to achieve is by abandoning completely the truth of origin. Then the next question is how can we abandon the second truth, the origin of suffering? Then the answer is the path, the truth of path. Therefore, the Buddha taught, after that he taught, now you should cultivate the path, or the path should be cultivated.
Oh, la, lam didwe garzo samlo rimbashi do dungal pango bashe pangdi bashe badiri badu ma kunjung pango kono goba thobdu rashe dini kunjung pango gudu samdu goda lam denjir kegi lam denjir sem dingni kegi dini negable lera odi goda kunjung pango gi nyembo lam dengo gure sidi gosu dini lam gomegi nurung chagwa da karasna lam gomegi nurung sana lam gomela da Tundi Kibarjin Gigoro. Dini Lamgi Yamin Gula Kimagi Tarsi Machine, di Tundi Ralegro, Yindimali Tundi Jeru Chingsora. Tundi Senaga, Tungan Gela Toas, Kasi Shivala Sungra, Kivala Toa Kiva de Resungra. Digazu Dini Tarba Tobdu Ruan Bashe, Togabanishi, Todurumashe, Tobala Kunjung, Tunagi Kunjum Pango Bashe, Tunagi Kunjum Payag Nimbo, the Lam in Bashe, Lamna Dunyan Magiva, the Toa Magiva Misivara. Toa kene di maduba misibara. Tubna Dharmachakra misibara. Adela kene lamgi neduru aslata. Give me bas na terse gozare.
So here, after until here, after knowing that suffering fully, and then knowing that we can abandon or avoid, or we can get free from suffering through abandoning all the kleshas and karma, which are the second, the origin of suffering, and then we will achieve the cessation as a result of that. And then in order for us to abandon all the kleshas and karma, we have to cultivate or practice the path. And that's why Buddha says the path should be cultivated. And then now, if we have fully understand them, then there's no way that we don't have this mind, which is the strong longing for the liberation. We should have this kind of mind from the very bottom of our heart, longing for the and then when we have this kind of mind, which makes me ask a longing, which is longing for the liberation from the very bottom of our heart. That means where mind is now mature. Mature means where mind is ready to practice the path. And then whether we can complete our practice on path depends on our diligence or perseverance. And then perseverance, the definition of perseverance here that was given by Shantideva is, it says the taking delight in virtue. Taking delight in virtue, means taking virtue, taking delight in virtue. That means you will be fully delighted to practice the path. So if you are fully delighted, then you will naturally have special power to put effort and perseverance in your practice. Then, as I said, if you put full effort, and there's no way that cannot be accomplished. So whether your path can be accomplished or completely depends on your perseverance, and perseverance is again being delightful on your practice.
Hola, diga se de gyumin se de dunda ni yore, chigar se na diga se ngejung chenji ba kegiro, ngejung chenji ba ke de se de ni lam gome ge samlo de de tharba de ni ma to samlo senda ya maro, ma de che de la tam nyanda da nyeba kurti da de le ge de ni shincha khurwa ge shincha ga ya maro. Din de se de ni tha chig da tharba de ni ge samlo yore, din da kunong de number da ba charo. Kunong number da ba de ngagi de ni cholam gari je ba samma yang tharbe gyu do gora. 나랑이 개와 두바디 개와 차마자 개와 차나는데 탑에 규르규르 개와 차마자 대상마 군롱을 라래기로 그래서 나랑 고메디 소신 겁나요 나랑 군롱데 세디 신샤예나 소신이 냠는 이거네 소신이 냠는 차기 말아 다 나랑 군롱데 탑아 던일마도 매바이나 되는 나랑 자통나요 탑아토에 규샤기로 뭐 제단더니 나랑이 자와 제대 상마디 탑아토에 규르 차마자디 군롱을 라래고 디상 yu mimpi gyunsen chik tere. Chik gara na ngarang gyawa dugare mara tundu la rala gara. Tundu yang ngijung tila tene kegwa ra. Tiyan yu mimpi gyunsen chik tere.
So when we say our mind become mature to practice the path, there's two reasons. Because when we have this kind of renunciation through understanding all this, the first three noble truth, then you totally become free of attachment to anything in this life. You don't practice for gathering wealth. You don't practice for having good reputation. You don't practice for becoming a famous person and so forth. So whatever you practice will be motivated by the longing of liberation. Therefore, then whatever you do at that, when we have this kind of mind, then with that kind of motivation, then whatever you do will be naturally on the path of liberation. So therefore, that makes us mature our mind stream one way. And then another one is, as I said, once you have this uncontrived sense of renunciation from samsara, then it will naturally put you in a great diligent person in your practice. You become a very diligent person. And then that makes, that's another factor that makes your mind stream mature. Generally speaking, you know, whatever we do dharma, whether it goes on the path of liberation or not, depends on our motivation. Even if you have a motivation of being famous or something good in this life, then even you are practicing the dzogchen, it doesn't mean you are practicing the path of liberation. It becomes something, the worldly kind of dharma. If you have a pure renunciation from the samsara and you are only thinking is longing for the liberation, then even you take a cup of tea, that also could become on the path of liberation. Therefore, it is everything depends on our motivation in general. And in this, at this point, after here, when we reach here, then we are supposed to have the genuine, authentic sense of renunciation. And if you have that, then whatever you do will be naturally on the path of liberation. And that's what we, the maturation of mind stream.
All of the Dagi Limba, not the Shinto Mamin Bajin, Sasha, and the Shinto de la Troya Mare, Digana Shinto Digidini, Subol Nigres, Kin Mambo Yungre, Pedro Chibaranga, the Chedium, Give Mamin Balanga to Chedi, Nimijation, Diladin, Agel Pel, Tado Pel, Dene, Sedi, Neva Kurdila, and Neva Kurdi Dunir, Diladin, Agel, Dini, Numung Peg, King, Chasigra. Did go Chegi to the Numare, Manu gonna chill at the young Numung Peg against Chasigra.
That's the reason why I said earlier with the example of eating unripened fruit. As I said, if you you eat fruit that is not ready yet to be eaten, then there's two shortcomings. One is you doesn't test it good as good as it's supposed to be. And then another reason is it could cause lots of problems your health, your stomach, and so forth. In the same way, if we try to practice the path before our mind stream is matured, which means we are ready for that kind of, then it could be, as I said earlier, it could bring not only benefiting us, but also it could bring some shortcoming or defect or fault here, is that if you practice Dharma and you know a little bit Dharma, then instead of have progress on your path, it might make you more arrogant person, more proud person, and then you might use that Dharma knowledge to collect wealth and to collect respect from the people in that way. If that happens, then that's what it means. You are practicing the Dharma before you are ready for that, and it becomes something that is harmful to you, because it will help you to increase your klesha mind, and which is not good for us.
Oh, did Sangye Tawa Nibakasu, any Chipala Dawa Sadi, any Lam Yamsile Rimba de Sonare, any O Digi, give members here the Drover Jibe, the Rimbani Sungdoa.
Therefore, when Buddha was teaching the Four Noble Truths, during the second recitation, he taught the function of the Four Noble Truths, which means he shows us the path of practicing it, and will include two parts. Again, the path of maturation and the path that liberates us.
Oh, that's that did away. Any Nijun K to do Tarva the new local Lamla Dunirke, any Lamla Judo, any Lam Dudora, the Duja Lamdi, then Sudim Thingy Lava, Sherab Lava Sumdi, Drup, then Sherab Lava Drubne Gomga, the Garatana, Tembashi Nelurara, Tembashi Gom, Della Sanang Top, then Sanang Tarsin, Tonlam Top, then the Tonlam the Tongsimba, the younger Gomlam Tarsin, then it Debutodora.
So then, when we are there, then we are really ready to engage in the path. Then the path we practice is, we usually say three trainings: the trainings of the morality or discipline, shila, and then the training in the samadhi or meditation, and training in the prajna or the wisdom. Then after that, of course, the main practice will be again same, the Four Noble Truths. We will be practicing Four Noble Truths through these three training: training on morality or ethical morality, and training on the meditation or meditative concentration, and then training in the prajna or wisdom. Then you will have the clarity of them. Then you will have the path of seeing. When we start to have the real realization, then you will gradually progress them. Then ultimately you achieve to the result. You will attain the result, and this is the way how you practice the path.
Oh, that's the Sangye Dawa Sambakasu, then it Java Debu in Jebala Dawa Asura. That Dawa Sambakasu, then it Dungal Shiver Jade, Shiver Jarme, then that Golam Tarjin, Milulam Toto, then it Dungal Shetar, that Shengua Yamara, Kunjung Power Jade, Power Jarme, Kunjung Pang Tare, that Dele Hatapaya Yamara, then that Power Jarme, Gobangun Jade, Gobo Top Sarada, Del Lata Top Yamara, then Gobangun Jade, Mundu Jarme. lamtember jade lamtene tharsin thare milo lam thop thare din de ne dile has lamten yamara lamtember jade temper jarme this thare this jawa debu jebala dawas.
And then when Buddha was teaching on Four Noble Truth, as I said earlier, he recited 3 times. So in Tibetan we say Deva Sum, which means the 3 recitation. So during the last or the 3rd recitation, it is said that he taught the result, function and result both of them. So when he said that, once you understand the suffering, there is no further understanding. Once you have actualized the cessation, there is no further actualization. Second one is once you have abandoned the origin of suffering, there is no further abandonment. Once you have actualized the cessation, there is no further the actualization. Then once you have cultivated the path, there is no more cultivation. The reason why he said is, once you completed the practice on this, then you receive, you achieve the result after the path of no more learning. Then there is no more thing that you need to understand, no more suffering at all. And then once you have already abandoned all the abandonment, and there is no more klesha or karma left that should be abandoned again. Then when we have already actualized and attained the cessation, the nirvana, and then no more further nirvana again to be attained by us or by the practitioner. And once we have completed practice on the path, and there's no more completion, no more practice on the path. That's what he says. Once the suffering is understood, there is no more understanding. Once the origin of suffering is abandoned, there is no further abandonment. Once the cessation is achieved or actualized, there is no further actualization. And once the path is practiced or the path is cultivated, there is no more cultivation.
Oh, that's digida dembashigi namsha durduji shusason.
So here I have completed teaching a concise way on the Four Noble Truth.
Then yegi shida yabuji shishing mara hine kazu tutu sasab jene shivayi in tugun severaye.
So I actually don't know much about it, but I did try my best to somehow I hope it could be some help for you.
Oh, that's that dring anala that nazo unjin Lodro hamara.
Naril, Lamaluramo.
Lama Lodro hama ki dine ngala di dembashi ko la shegore sungsong. Dine danda da nazo yijindu gi ari gi dine tensa kedidi la da di da dreba yugin samala dine choro samala da dembashi ko la shegi ko gabra de pe kebo sambo sungsong. Dine tuji seshugi.
So I have been requested to teach on Four Noble Truth by the KTG president, Lama Lodro Lamo. And because of that request, I got this good, fortunate opportunity to share a little knowledge, a little wisdom about the Four Noble Truth with all of you, primarily the KTD, which is the North American seat of His Holiness the Yom Kamapa, and all the related center and people. Therefore, I would like to express my gratitude to you.
Oh, that's the o ningin 상말아야 다 키는 도낭 전에네 semba 생긴 상말아야 tuji chesugi in 가와도 지수 이런 식이 이렇게 그런서라 두 냠내라 두번서베라와 러와슈기.
And I would like to express my thanks to all of you who listen with a great interest, and then I really hope it will be something helpful for your practice.
Oh, 라서드니 tuji 체 상말아.
And thank you very much, everyone.
다시들레 장매 이 장매요.
Trashidere, countless Trashidere to all of you.
Oh, 라서드니 데드라 투섬 집에 계획서 데 랑신 숨제 탐전의 투몽제데 랑신 숨제 탐제 덴바시기 내로 또네 애닝건 람 아니 사다 람 타르신 상계고 반토베시도 모아도 모남기 삼절 나와라쇼.
And let us do the dedication thinking that whatever wisdom we have achieved from starting this Four Noble Truths. May all sentient beings realize the meaning of the Four Noble Truths and achieve the Buddhahood lastly. Okay, I think our wonderful teacher is done. Let me say a few words before we do the dedication. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude with the full respect from the very bottom of my heart to Teacher La, Drupon Khenpo, who I know for a long time, and your teaching is just excellent and priceless. There's no explain that I can express the quality of that. And secondly, I would like to express my thanks to our respected President Lama Lodro to have this organized, which is also a great opportunity for me to learn something from Drupon Khenpo. I have a really long wish to learn from something from him. Like when I was a very young and handsome looking man, when I was a teenager, because we spent time together, but it didn't happen. But because of you, President La, starting last year, I have this opportunity to learn something from him, and that is really very good opportunity for me. Therefore, I also like to thank President, and I would like to express my apology to all the listeners that even though the price, the teaching of Drupon Khenpo is priceless, but since my English is very broken, I must have not be able to put in a very beautiful way because I was trying to put his unbroken teaching and blessing into my broken language. So that's impossible. But the good thing is that I can understand Tibetan very well. So I might think that I have not missed any important point, even though I could not put them in a very beautiful way. So whatever mistake I may have made, I would like to say sorry to all of you. And lastly, I would like to pray and wish that we will have this opportunity to gather together and learn Dharma from him again and again. Now I'm ready to do the dedication. Thank you very much, everyone. Jambal Pawo,
Kimba da kundu sambo deyan deshin Deda kungi jesu dalo jingewa deda tamje rabdo ngo Kin dewa soso ngo pende namka kebarash Duna dana dagi ko korwa dungi gyaso kembarash
Benza Sado, Samaya, Manapalaya, Benza.
Anuradha meva vasa siddhi mevrajata savagana sudha medita mishriyam kruhum ha ha ho bhagavan savadada gada veda mami manda badri bhava mahasamaya sato
Lasso, Guse Shapete,
Lasso
Kadiche.
kibana. Lasso tuji che. Tung kagir na tuji che.